Oh, hi! The following is a conversation with Alyssa Sokol. She's an astrophysicist. She wrote a thesis on black holes. She's got her PhD last year. She has a podcast as well that's called The Orphic, where she talks about all sorts of stuff around the universe, consciousness, aliens. She's as well a starseed. If you know, you know. So we talk about her journey, her experience throughout the years of studying, a little bit about mental health, the universe, obviously stars, spirituality, and a few other things. As always, my friends, this is the curious art of being human. If you want to support it, please make sure you subscribe to this channel, give us a blue thumb, share it to whoever you think is interested about that. I think that is pretty much it. And now, Dr. Alyssa Sokol. Let's fucking go. Alyssa, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. We started to talk already, but can you give just a quick little presentation of who you are, what you do, just to give a little bit of context before we get into...
Definitely. Yeah. Okay. So my name is Alyssa Sokol. So I'm an astrophysicist. I have my PhD. I got my PhD in December. So just about 8 months ago is when I finished up, and I finished at, I did my PhD at UMass Amherst in Massachusetts, and I'm from New York. And so let's see, in general, like obviously if I did a PhD in astrophysics, that means I'm pretty interested in the universe and space.
Yeah.
But I also right now I'm very spiritual as well. So really kind of what I am most focused on and doing in my life right now is bridging science and spirituality, and understanding, what I do on my own podcast, The Orphic, and on my Instagram page and everything is just it's really just also following my natural curiosity. The reason that I'm trying to do that is because that's naturally what keeps me up at night, right? It's not like anyone's forcing me to do this. It's like I love the universe, and I love astronomy and astrophysics and physics and math and science. And then I'm also, I really just had this whole new spiritual world open up to me in this last few years, and like my deepening my awakening and everything. And I really do think that there's so much consciousness to the universe, and I think the galaxies have consciousness to them. I think the galaxies have souls, and all these celestial bodies have souls. And what are we doing in academia? We're just studying the surface level, and nobody's talking about the soul of Mother Gaia in academia. And nobody's talking about, I just think that it's very possible that this layer of consciousness of the universe is what is a missing link to help us understand everything. And so the way that I see it is there's a huge blind spot in academia that nobody's understanding that there's a consciousness and that everything is alive. And so I see that, and I'm frustrated with it, and so I go, I'm gonna figure it out myself. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. I really just want to I want to know how the whole universe works. And that's what I really care about. And I just love teaching. I love teaching people about astronomy and the universe and all this stuff. And I've been into it for a while. So I've kind of just always been like that space girl. Like it's, even though I like joke with some of my friends, even though what I'm doing now is like a bit of a departure in terms of, add in aliens, add in a little bit more spirituality and meditation and consciousness and all this stuff. At the same time, it's like, since high school, everyone knows I love space. Everyone knows I'm doing space things. So it's like, it's a little different, but tracks.
Yeah. What is the thing in New York that you like the most, but most people wouldn't get, like something that is not usual talk about, or
I was gonna say I feel like I have an inverse answer to that question, because I feel like everyone likes New York City, but I don't like New York City. I have an inverse answer to that. I don't know, like I'm definitely more of a nature open air kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
So, where I did my undergrad in upstate New York, where at Colgate University, where it was very rural and beautiful like that. And so it's kind of just funny. All of my siblings naturally gravitate towards cities and everything. And I'm just always up in the mountains somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely kind of, yeah. And in general, I'm like, I don't know anything else about New York. I don't know. It's a great melting pot. I love,
Mm-hmm.
I love that I grew up here and everything. Um, but yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know if that really answered the question, but it
What
was
what is
something.
yeah? What is the most like how it's like to grow up in a place where it's like the place? Maybe I don't know if we could say that it's the most famous city. New
Oh
York City is
yeah.
probably one of the most, if it's
Yeah,
not the most.
probably.
Like, is it like more of a myth, more of a like glamorized, or is it really the friends like
Yeah,
type of
friends.
life?
Yeah. So I grew up, and I'm currently living on Long Island, which is about 1 hour outside of New York City, but
Mm.
it's close. And obviously, growing up, we went into the city a lot, and yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I think for people that love cities, it's not over glamorized, and the people go in and they're like, "Ha." But I go in and I'm like, this is dirty. I'm like,
Yeah.
I need some air, need some fresh air,
Yeah.
please. Um, but other than that, it's no, it is a great city, and there's a lot going on. And I've kind of have been joking that the thing that has gotten me back into New York City lately is I have a Kundalini yoga studio.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been gotten into really into Kundalini yoga in this last year or so. And there's a studio in New York City that I go to that my brother introduced me to. And so in the fall when I was finishing up my PhD, that would be the only reason I would go into the city, and I would say I would go into New York City for the yoga class, and then I would leave right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it is nice to have, it's definitely nice to be so close to where there's always like something, the
Yeah.
airports, there's always,
Yeah.
it's that hub. So it's nice, the
Totally.
proximity.
For people that are very connected, it's pretty hard whenever you arrive in a city like that, or even just grocery, when I go in grocery
Yes,
store, when there's a lot of
exactly.
people, a lot of energy going on, like you can't focus, you can't really
Exactly.
stay.
And, so like I've talked about this with my brother. So my brother, David, he is also just as on the same like spiritual path
Mm-hmm.
and everything as me. And he's the one that showed me the Kundalini studio, and he's lived in New York City for like 10 years. And I'm always say like, I don't get it as an empath, as a spiritual person. I was like, I get so overwhelmed. And he's like, no, you don't get it. So it's funny. He views it almost as this converse way where it's like, because there's so much available to you, it's he also kind of says that there's so much that can be reflected right back to you in terms of synchronicities,
Interesting.
right? It's
Yeah.
like there's so much data available
Mm.
everywhere that it almost can if you're thinking of it from that perspective, it can immediately reflect your aura and reflect your reality right back to you, because there's so many things. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Or
Interesting.
just there's
Yeah.
always something. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't really get it as a empathic person. That's too many
Yeah.
auras overlapping. That's too many
Yeah.
auras in a close
Totally.
proximity.
100%. I guess it depends if you're somebody that wants to like tune in, or that is in a phase where you want to like absorb and curious about
Right, because it's like, well, you can
what's
tap
happening.
in. It's like it really is just your perspective, because it's all of these. You can tap in and use that collective consciousness to your advantage. And I think it's so physical, right? Like you always go back to the aura, and the aura is very physical, and there's something to being in a close physical proximity to all those people. And it's like you can tap into that collective consciousness to elevate you, or to like use that collective energy to your advantage, or you can let yourself be overwhelmed by it, which I guess is what I opt for. I
Yeah,
just like, nah.
totally.
But yeah.
So take me back to like the earliest memory you have of like looking into this black sky with little lights and out there, and be like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, I know,
Where
right?
are we? Why?
Mm-hmm.
Just like, how did you get into what like sparked your curiosity around
Yeah.
the
So it's
universe?
funny because I wasn't really one of those people that was like, oh, at 5 years old, like I got a telescope. And it was
Oh
like,
yeah.
so from childhood, it wasn't really one of those things for me. It actually kind of clicked on like a little bit later, well, not that much later in like high school. It
Mm-hmm.
clicked on in high school. I wanted to be a veterinarian for my life before
Mm-hmm.
that because I loved animals. And so that's what I wanted to do for a really long time. And that was what I was dead set on for many years. And then I got into high school and I kind of realized even more so that yeah, I've always been very like math brained. I'm not really good with like the reading long passages and answering a question. I'm not good with like reading long things. I've always been very more like black or white math
Mm-hmm.
physics brain. And so then in high school I started taking physics classes and everything because that's when you would start taking physics. And so, I really gravitated towards that. But what it really was in, so in my 10th grade, when I was about 14, I took this astronomy elective class in high school. And so it was just like, it was the way we divide up the year into quarters. It was a few months. It was this tiny little
Mm-hmm.
thing, but something about that class, and it was so scratching the surface, it was a high school
Mm-hmm.
elective, but it was just astronomy and it was just the basics. And we learned like all these things, and just something about it, so I guess I was about like 14, something about it just really like took me over, and I was just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my god, like I just love this and I think it's so cool. And I just, yeah, it was just like, I don't know, it was just this fascination and this wonder. And I think it started becoming part of my identity at that point. At that
Mm-hmm.
point, it kind of just started becoming part of my identity. But then I remember, so that's when I would start looking at the sky. That's
Mm-hmm.
around that's when I would start looking at the sky. And so it was the combination of knowing that astronomy and physics, a little bit of the logical side, knowing like, oh, okay, like this goes hand in hand with physics and astrophysics, and knowing like, oh, I gravitate towards that already. And then also it was just really, I think, kind of this like soul purpose, soul mission just
Mm-hmm.
turned. I really feels like that's what it was. Like around this time that I took the class, it was just like the flip, the switch just turned on, and it was just like,
Yeah.
oh right, I have to do this. And there was this one night where I do recall like, that I talk about sometimes, that it was like we were out in we were in England for a wedding or something. We were at this castle that was a bit more removed, so we weren't in like the main city of London, and we got woken up in the middle of the night for a fire alarm actually, and we all had to
Mm-hmm.
like evacuate, get out. It was just an alarm, but and then it was a really nice night sky that night, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember I was just like, and even when we got back into the room, I was like looking back at it again through the windows, and I was just like, it was what the thought was like, I need to know everything that's up there.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the thought was. It was
Yeah.
like, it was this instant knowing, like I need to know everything about what's up there, and like I have to do this for the rest of my life. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really what it was. And I was around like 14, and it really kind of just solidified, and I just completely shifted gears. And then I continued with the physics, and I continued after that tiny elective class of astronomy, I continued just like learning on my own, and just becoming a bit immersed with it. And yeah, and so that's kind of how, what set me off on the path. And then I ended up majoring in physics and astronomy in undergraduate.
I see. So so from 14 years old, you had never, after that moment, you never had any kind of like doubt of what or whatever. Like it sparked it,
No.
and then it was
Yeah.
just like
I never
spiraling
had
up
any doubt. It
until
was
yeah,
like as soon as, right after
yeah,
that, it was like, oh, this is what I'm doing with my entire
yeah.
life. And yeah, and it was like there was never any other option, which is kind of just
Mm.
funny, in terms of just when people go into, college, and they're like, oh, I don't know, like thinking whatever. And which is why it was interesting, because it's very difficult,
Mm-hmm.
physics and
Yeah.
astrophysics, and it's a lot of math, it's very difficult. But
Mm.
for the whole time there was never any other option for me,
Yeah.
because like I could never think of anything that could replace that. And that's how, that's how you kind of know when something is in your bones that much. It's very much like a deep soul calling.
Yeah, totally. Did you have any other people at that time in your life that were a little bit into like that field, or was it completely different from all your friends, all your
it was completely different. Yeah, like nobody really, no, like a lot of my friends were into wanted to be doctors, and so I do have quite a few friends that ended up going to medical school and are doctors and everything. So I had friends interested in that, but like really the physical sciences, physics and especially astronomy, no, like I didn't really have any friends that were into that. And it was, and I think it's just, I feel like too, that's when I started, my brain has never been really focused on just Earth. That's the thing. That's just what's funny about it is, and especially now at this point, when that was like 15 years ago, now I'm 30, and it's like, I just feel like everyone else kind of goes about their life thinking like the bounds of their mind are just like the planet and what's going on here in our reality. And just for a really, really long time, like I never really cared about like what's going on this planet. It's true. Like I was always just outwardly focused, or just when I would think about life, it was just the whole universe. It was never just like, oh yeah, life as we know it on this planet. It was always like, oh, life is the universe. So, I did find it, or it is still like, sometimes I never really know what people's mental perspective is on, it's just, I've been thinking of the whole universe in my mind for a really long time. And I know most people don't think that way at all. So it's just, something I've noticed over the years, the difference in perspective. And then obviously when I continue to study it and actually learn more about what it contains, then I'm really out there. Then don't get started with the aliens.
No, but I mean, it's an interesting point, because you like the way it probably impacted your just like awareness and consciousness just by studying things that are at a scale that is like hardly that we can hardly perceive, like billions of years, all the stuff around that. Like it definitely opens your mind and create like a total different point of view on a little problem that you have like right now, a little thing that's happening in your life, when all these things.
So and just things like on Earth and just history, and I don't know, I was just like I just did not gravitate towards any of that stuff, that was just happening here. So
how do you think how did it impact the way you approached your daily life? I'm talking the human experience. With expanding from like this age, like 14, 15, with expanding your awareness about life, about the universe, and probably in your consciousness as well. How this impacted your experience here?
I think that for me, it kind of just, I think I just have always felt a little bit removed from like day-to-day life and society things, and just honestly, like even things, and even especially things like, I don't know, like politics or government or social issues. Like honestly, it's been very interesting noticing the difference in the way that I think versus my friends think, just grow, like, as you get into college and you start caring about social issues. I feel like that sounds so terrible, but it's just like, I just can't really explain it. There was just always this kind of veil of disconnect with these certain things for me. And it almost felt like it was just like not for me to need to care about. And I think or just not for me. Like, I guess the best way I could describe it is just kind of a level of disconnect with other certain things. But then I also, I still definitely had that like self motivation aspect of wanting to, wanting my life to look successful. And I came from where I grew up on Long Island is very competitive, and it's actually like yeah, it's not a normal, like, especially, yeah, where I'm from on Long Island, and the high school district that I went to was like very competitive. A lot of kids going to Ivy Leagues, and it's like very much this, yeah, you know, a lot of my friends from college had completely different experiences in their high school, and so just for me, it was really this competitive nature, and so there was still this part of me that was playing the human game, and has been up until like recently. I'm trying to, you know, deprogram some of that stuff
Yeah.
and let that go. But there was definitely this part of me that's like, you know, felt like I had to keep going and had to play this game to get ahead. And I think also kind of just knowing that in the academia path, and this is just something that continued to unfold over the years, you know, I think for me, like, I knew I wanted to reach that point of like getting to a PhD, and you need other people to allow that for you, right? You need to have like mentors, or you need to have people above you grant you that and grant you that access. And I think there was kind of this weird subconscious thing in my mind over the years of being afraid that someone's going to get in my way, you know, and knowing that I need to reach this point, and knowing, and really the whole energy of what it has been since I have gone on this path is, I don't know where I'm going, but I know, but I know I have to go somewhere. I know that I'm going somewhere with this information, and I know I need to keep going to get to a certain point. And it was a bit more revealed to me in the last few years that where I was going is taking this in kind of the spirituality direction. But it was always like, it was always like this has to work out, or like I have to, there's never been another option. And then it came all these issues with authority figures and all of these, you know, self-worth things in graduate school of feeling like what if this person gets in my way, you know, what if this person gets in my way? So I've definitely still had all of those like kind of very human, you know, competitive tendencies, but then at the same time, yeah, just kind of like not really caring in terms of like, I've always like knowing, you know, always knowing that this is what I'm doing and feeling so confident in it and being grateful that I am someone that is so sure about what they're doing with their life, you know. But then at the same time, yeah, being a bit, it's almost a little bit too tunnel vision sometimes, where it's a bit the way that I like human is, because my mind is always thinking about the universe. It's like, I'm a bit like very black or white. So like I'll have my things that I might put my brain on the shelf, like The Bachelor and my reality shows. And then I have like the universe. So there's not really, and I feel like the middle ground is things like politics or government or caring more about society, like interaction things. And that's that part of like there's just been something there that's like has been missing in me, and it feels like it's a little bit more intense, like it's either you know, doing things that are just reality shows, or it's the whole universe.
Totally. Well, I mean, all these things in the middle, very often they're just like distraction for to divide people and stuff like that. And when you don't want to let yourself influenced by things that literally don't matter, right? Like if you think that your life is in the hand of whoever political representative you have, you're missing something, right? So like
and so I think I just knew for a long time that didn't matter, and I think and then I really knew some things around 2020 when the next level of my awakening happened. But then, you know, kind of before that, I was just like, there, you know, I'm only able to make more sense of it now. Like, oh, no wonder. That's why I never really cared about these other things. There was definitely always a level of like, my friends care about these certain other things in the world way more than I do. And I never really understood why.
Did this like bother you in any way being younger, or not much? Like being different and like knowing that you're different. Did you have anything that helped you go through this, or
I think,
or was it bothering you at all, or not much?
You know, I don't think it really bothered me, because I was able to still, you know, relate to friends and everything. on regular levels. I think there was obviously just a big shift and things that happened in 2020 where the differences became to be a bit, too much at certain times. But yeah, and that's when, I really started feeling the most different in the last few years, once I realized where it was leading me to kind of this spiritual side and this deeper thing that really not that many people know about, because it kind of felt like before that I was just like, yeah, I want to know about the universe, but there was always some disconnect because most people can't comprehend or don't care that much, that they don't take the time to think about the whole universe at once. And so they don't, but that's where my brain is all the time. So, kind of just a disconnect there.
Yeah. Did you ever think younger about the concept of just like thinking about the infinity, the concept of infinity?
Yeah,
Of
I think
yeah.
I think that's what was kind of keeping me, would make me, continue to be curious about it. I think, I remember like I used to sometimes, it's just like every kid has their like existential moments where they like realize like, whoa, like we're gonna die or something like that. And
Yeah.
I remember kind of having those thoughts when I was like maybe before, I think like before even I really got into astronomy, or kind of just these existential thoughts are like, is there like nothing after this? Or, and really kind of getting zoned out and freaked out by that, because obviously like I'm sure like every kid goes through those stages of like, is there nothing after this? And thinking of that, I remember kind of ruminating a few times on that concept of like nothing, of like, if there could be nothing, but there is something now. And then, so I think I kind of thought that before I really got more into astronomy and everything. But I had always been, and I come from a spiritually connected family. So that's the other thing, because that's a huge part of, right? Like that's a huge part of the path that people take, depends on their family or how accepting things are. And my family is very spiritually connected, and like we've always believed in mediumship and mediums and everything. And so we grew up kind of watching those shows. So there was always this belief in me that, souls continue on, and that there is no like complete ending. And I'm also Jewish. So that was another thing. I grew up Jewish. I don't really like resonate with it these days, or religion in general personally. But I did grow up in that faith, and I had a family that was very accepting of energy and spiritual things. So I think that kind of contributed to me just like understanding, that souls are infinite.
Yeah. Interesting. Did you what do you think is the main difference with religion and spirituality?
I think that I think that religion has what I actually, what's more relevant to my own personal life experiences is the pressure of tradition of things, and keeping it in the same bloodline and keeping things in the same circle. That was actually what turned me off more to religion than the religion stuff itself. And I know that's different for other people, but I do think, the way that I think is that there's one ultimate truth. And so I don't really understand the point of needing to put them into separate boxes. And for a lot of other people, religion has this like shame and like all this stuff. And I never really had that from Judaism in terms of like, oh, like God is this, or you have to do this to like appease God or be good and all this stuff. And so I never really had that. So it wasn't really the religion itself at all that that was the issue. It was actually more just about that mentality of like, you can only be with this, person if they're of this
The
thing,
separation.
and the way that it's passed down through generations, and how it doesn't necessarily make sense anymore, maybe these tradition things. And so that actually had more of a direct impact on my life. And then that's what turned me off to it. I didn't like the exclusionary aspect of it. I didn't like the, and yeah, it affected me personally with some stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, that's one of the main aspects of spirituality, is the oneness aspect. So that makes sense that this is something that turned you off for sure.
Yeah.
So what does it take to get on and get a PhD?
A lot of craziness. You have to love torturing yourself. You have to love torture. No. So
how long does it take?
How long does it take? My PhD took about 7 years. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So I graduated my undergrad at Colgate in 2014, and then I took a gap year actually, because I wasn't sure, yeah. And that was the other thing. Even deciding to do a PhD, the reason I decided to do a PhD was because, well, one, I didn't like, the main reason was I didn't know enough yet. And that's always been what's keeping me going. Like, I need to know everything. It's like what my brain says. I'm like, I need to know more. And so I learned a lot of physics and cried during physics exams in college and all this stuff. It really kind of like beats you down, but it gives you thick skin, and it gave me the skills that I needed. And but so yeah, it was like I got towards the end of college, and I was like, okay, well, one, I don't know enough yet. I know that there's so much more that I need to know. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was, I was like, what else would I do? I can't see myself doing anything else. And even something in astronomy, to be, at that point, I knew that to be considered a professional astronomer, or some kind of to do like science with your career, you basically need a PhD. What I could do after undergraduate was kind of maybe certain kinds of teaching, or maybe teaching high school or something like that. But I was like, I just knew that I needed to continue on. So, I took a gap year though, and did some tutoring and stuff like that, and studying for these big physics exams. And then, I started UMass Amherst in 2015. And it was definitely a journey. It was, I did multiple different projects, and I had a lot of twists and turns along the way. And the journey to get a PhD is, and everyone says, I never knew that, I never thought that it would be a thing where I wasn't passionate enough, because a lot of people say, like, if you're going to do a PhD in something, like, you need to make sure you're passionate about it. And I was like, I always knew I had that down pat. Yeah. So I was like, oh, I'm fine in that department. Even though the passion does, it also waned a little bit here and there, which is a little freaky, was a little freaky at times, but it was never fully gone. But, and then,
what was the most challenging part of this?
I would say there was the most challenging part was basically towards the end, finishing up at the end. But there was another second place was basically the middle of the program, after I had just taken my qualifying exam. So about 2.5-3 years in, you do something called a qualifying exam, which is you have to have all of the knowledge in your mind. It's everything. It's all of astrophysics. It's the whole universe. Everything that we learned in our grad classes, which was the whole universe. And also my research at the time, and my research for that time period was star clusters in dwarf galaxies. So dwarf galaxies are kind of like these amorphous galaxies that aren't massive enough to have a spiral or elliptical shape, and so there's a lot that we can study nearby the Milky Way. So basically at this point in your program, you stand in front of a blackboard for 2 hours, and 1 hour you're being questioned on your research, and then another hour you're being questioned on anything is fair game in the whole universe. And they always say that, so I really buckled down for that and studied for a few months, and that was, a really big accomplishment, passing that, which I was able to pass the first time. They always say the peak of your knowledge is the day that you take your qualifying exam, because then it all always goes down from there, and it's probably, I mean, a little bit true. Because when else are you going to be so well studied and well read on everything? And then after that, you go into your specialty more, right? And so it was weird. This is why I really try to speak a lot on like mental health stuff with academia, because especially it's just kind of ridiculous, because still, even in 2023, when you think that everyone has gone through all this mental health stuff with the pandemic, and it just, everyone has this woke culture, and everyone thinks like, oh no, we care about things now. It's that has not trickled down into the academia that I know. Nobody shows weakness. Nobody admits that anything is wrong. Everyone has imposter syndrome, but nobody, it's literally not acceptable to like show signs of weakness. Like it's not. And so what happened was, then after a few months after my qualifying exam, like the burnout just like hit me like crazy. And I just really went through this deep slump of burnout, and I had no idea why. And I thought that I was the only one. And then what happened was I Googled it. I Googled something like, I don't know, like no motivation after your qualifying exam, PhD program, something like that. Turns out it's this whole thing. It's a thing. It's a thing that it's really common after this point in your journey, to really like have some depression or burnout or lose motivation and stuff. And that, it picks up, it's like a graph, but it's a very common thing. And I was like pissed when I found this out, because I had been in grad school already for 3 years at this point. I met people, like I've been to conferences, I have networked, like I had been in grad school for 3 years, and I had to Google to find out that my depression at that point in my third year of my program was normal. 2 months into it, I had to sit for 2 months like in sadness and think that I was broken. I had been in school for 3 years already at that point. That message didn't make its way to me, that's a normal thing. It was fucked up.
It's really crazy, yeah.
If I can curse on
For sure. How do you navigate it? Because the thing is like, so because you have like, it's climaxing in 2 hours, basically all these years that you prepped for that moment. How do you manage this stress? And like, if you miss that, what happens? Like, is it basically can you repass it, or is it?
Yeah. So the way that we did it in our program, every program is different. The way that we did it was, you had two chances to pass. And it was also, so if you didn't pass your first time, there was another one, but then there was also to get you to PhD candidacy, you had to pass the qualifying exam, but then it was also kind of holistic based on your performance in classes and everything else. So there was an overall vote. So it was technically a part of it, but it was an important part. But you did have a second chance, which was nice, but which you could take like a few months later. But yeah, it was a lot of pressure. And, I didn't realize until I got to that was the other thing, is the whole point, every stage of this long 7-year, so in general, PhDs in like sciences like physics and astrophysics definitely take like between 5 and 7 years. Every program is different. I would say some people can do it in 5, and my program, people leaned more towards like 6 to 7. Sometimes people took 8 too, or longer. Honestly, it depends, because this is it's such a huge phase of life, and sometimes people have big life events that happen in that time. That was my entire 20s. I was there from age 22 to 29. So it's like, it's your whole 20s. And so yeah, it's, the whole first part of the program, that's at the top of the hill, and that there's more to do after that, because then you have to do your thesis. But actually that almost was it was basically the biggest culmination point of your whole program. You had to pass that to get to the rest. And so it was definitely a lot of pressure, and it was blinders on that moment for years. And and it was big relief. It was like the best day. It's in my top like 3 to 5 categories of the best days of my life. It was definitely that day. It was very rewarding to pass.
Is there like people who really after that really like go deep into the depression and
there are,
and like not even come back to the thing or like things like that?
Yeah, that's also, it's also a big point of a lot of people don't make it past. There are people that don't make it past that point in the program. There are people that don't pass. It's kind of like a weeding out point. There's most people, most people do, but there's definitely a percentage that don't make it past that point for one reason or another, or kind of just choose to opt out. But I think I think there is a huge percentage of people that, because this is what the feeling was I didn't understand how, like, I had just gotten to the top of this mountain that I had been dying to climb for, and I was like so gung-ho on for years, and I had gotten to the top, and I felt like I was at the peak of my knowledge, and I was the most confident I had ever been, because I definitely had a lot more imposter syndrome before that, and truly all that studying, it did help me, and I really did feel like I knew what I was doing after that point. And then all of a sudden, when just like the immense burnout just hits you like really out of left field, and just all of this stuff. And that's why it was so weird, because it came like right off the heels of this really peak moment where so I wasn't expecting it. But I do think a lot of people go through that, and I think there's still so many people that don't know what that is, or that judge themselves. And I think people probably have their own way of getting out of it, because just like anything in life, like nothing lasts forever. So these are phases, and people have their way of getting out of it. But I think it's kind of just one of those things where just like anything, it's exacerbated by you judging yourself throughout the whole time. And I guess my guess would just be that people just make it worse on themselves, because people are making it worse on themselves than they need for it to be. And my mission is, from whatever I can control, or like, I was back in my department a few months ago talking to some of the younger grad students, and I informed them that some of the students that had just passed their exams and everything, and they were going through the same thing, they were going through the same burnout, and I was like their little fairy godmother from the future, and I was like telling them, this is normal, like don't be hard on yourself, like take it easy. If you go months without doing work, like it's fine. Like I did that so many times in the time, and just the relief on their faces, because it was the same thing. They didn't know either. This is what I'm saying. Like, it's
nobody tell you.
Nobody tells you anything, because everyone pretends to care about mental health, and they pretend to care that, like, oh no, now this matters, or like now we care about you as a human. But then they still go out and they just put on their brave faces, and so it's ridiculous. Like the relief in these people's and these guys, it was like these 2 guys in my program, the relief in their face, they were like really, they were like, that's normal, wow, I'm so glad you said that. Oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. And I was like, yes, it's normal. And so, I just think it's all about giving people more permission, because I don't think there's necessarily maybe a way to stop that period of burnout or anything, but it's just like, how much worse are you going to make it for yourself by beating yourself up?
Yeah, totally. How do you think we we catch up on that gap between, because the way if we talk about just like, let's say, Western society, the way technology is evolving as exponentially, but human, let's say, just I was going to say morality, but not necessarily morality, but let's say the overall wisdom of the overall human wisdom, even though, but the modern one, because I believe, way far back, guys had way more wisdom that what we have today.
Yeah.
How, like, why and how, I'm a millennial like you, how us we can do what we can at our level, help bridging that gap between soulless things
Yeah.
and developing more human basic
Yeah.
things like you did, by example.
Yeah, I think
in
it's
this
like,
world.
I think it's just gonna be on people to people, and just, yeah, kind of, I think people just need to talk about their experiences more, and everything. And there's, I'm not sure, like sometimes I'm like, I don't know about how much it can go into the institution of academia and everything, because it's like, I don't know, I feel like the area for change is like the students, just kind of students talking amongst themselves more, and kind of just being more honest, or seeing, I don't know, I had all these ideas of ways to help, and then I get too many ideas and can't do any of them. But it's just, I think they're, because right now some of those older generations, like, I don't know, it's so weird to me, because of how, like I said a bunch of times, it's, they think that they're making progress and things, like, by having, it's like they're trying, but something is still missing. And just because what it is when they talk about mental health in academia, all they do this is what it is. All they do is they talk about work-life balance, and they're like, okay, and they're like, this is how you're more productive at work. Take breaks, do whatever. This is really what it is. It's I think what's missing is the spirituality of there's a spiritual piece of the acceptance, because all that, when they're trying to do, and when they have these little presentations on mental health, or, I was in grad school for 7 years, and especially through the pandemic and everything. And so I've seen it all, and I've seen, like, the angles that they're trying to come about it. But from my opinion, it's always just like, it's always to enforce, like, a work-life balance. Just taking breaks or whatever. And I'm like, that doesn't, what does that mean for your shame of when you felt like an idiot, when your advisor embarrassed you in your meeting with them 3 years ago, that's still living as trauma in your body? Like, is that helping you accept your shame? Like, no, there's that's what it is. There's so much shame in the world and in academia, and this is what I have personally moved through. There's a lot of shame, and I think the piece that's missing is the acceptance. And I think that happens from, it's giving people permission. And that's what I tried to do when I talked to those people that are younger in the program now. I tried to give them permission to have their experience. And I think, that's really kind of the spirituality that I embody, or that I, lean towards, just the acceptance of it all. And so I think, like, that's what's missing, because I think it's okay that there's the range of experiences. It's really hard to do a PhD, but I just think there's so much pent up shame. And, like, if I have these experiences, obviously so many other people do, and people have been mortified, and people have been embarrassed, and people have been, like, made to feel stupid, and it's still living in their bodies, and there isn't this acceptance of it. And, then you just go deeper into being hard on yourself, and then can you forgive yourself for being hard on yourself? And I've had to move through a lot of layers with this, and it's, it's really just sometimes you need someone else to give you permission. And that's what I try to do with those other kids. I try to be the one to give them permission, because nobody does, or it's rare.
Is the feeling is that you are all competing with each other, or is there like a sense of competition? Because I think it's just a like, personal belief that like the fear, like the thinking that we compete with other people is a lot tied with like I hide myself. I don't want to show weakness. I don't want to say, oh, I have this problem or whatever, because I'm gonna be perceived in this world as weak, and I'm not gonna make it. And this is a big part of when you awaken to this reality, is that you understand that no, you don't compete with anybody, because nobody can be you. And once you leverage your true unique self. But as a student through this, do you feel like you had like a big sense of you had to compete with other students?
It's definitely, there's definitely the competition aspect of it, because it's always being pushed on you that, oh, well, when you graduate in the job market and you have to have this many papers, and oh, it's so hard, and oh, the jobs are dwindling, and oh, it's so hard to get a faculty job, and all this languaging around this is just making it worse. But it's also so I feel like in terms of I think what it is in academia, or my experience of a PhD, was there's this pressure that once you get to the end, that you have to do all these things to make yourself look good when you get to the end and need to find a job, and they're constantly drilling in you that it's really difficult, and that there's there's not enough available, that there's people that the ratio of PhDs that graduate to people that to the types of jobs or academia is low, and like so they're always drilling that into you. But then it's also this it's also kind of just this competition of throughout the program, just this worthiness thing to be to keep up, and just to be present, feeling like you have earned your seat at the table, or just, being able to talk about things. And it's the other thing that I kind of try to tell students is that, certain knowledge is really gradual and happens over time. And I remember, sitting in conference rooms, or sitting in discussions and stuff with other grad students that were older when I was a first year, and they're talking about all these things in the universe, and I didn't understand anything. But then naturally, a lot of things, knowledge is compounded naturally over time. So this is another thing that I would kind of just try to instill in people. Like, sometimes you just takes time to understand a concept, and then it just happens naturally. And I think that it can be applied to like a lot of things, right? Your confidence just develops naturally. But this whole thing of like, oh my God, this person knows this, and I don't know it. And just, kind of feeling like you're going to slip through the cracks, or that you're not worthy to be there anymore. A lot of that, but in terms for the competition stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of things were shaped through fear a lot, right? Like in this society, it's just from day one is like do this, because otherwise you'll have the repercussions.
And also in astronomy too, it's this there's this massive rat race for telescope time and telescope proposal. So that's the other thing that's going on. It's every year there's a new telescope proposal cycle or there's a new telescope. And it's always like, these proposals, like, I was working up till 2 a.m. on the proposal. And it's like all astronomers are procrastinators too. So whatever there's a week that's a proposal deadline, it's like, this is canceled. Like, it's fine. Everyone's working on their proposals, and just this whole like, mindset, you know? And so it's always, it's that too. It's like, it's the nature of also research. There's the research competition too. There's that. There's telescope time is limited, or there's a lot of people proposing for telescope time, and you have to have the next best idea, and that whole pressure of having good ideas and having your own ideas. And that's hard too, especially in a PhD program. You're growing into an independent researcher, so, and that's another thing that I found happened over time, that I try to like tell younger students, and as far as just there's a theme here in what I'm saying, which is that you evolve naturally and you grow naturally. And when you're in a more adolescent phase of that, it's so intimidating to see the other people around you in a future version, because, you know, when I was like a first year or second year, I couldn't even fathom doing research independently, or couldn't even fathom coming up with my own idea of a research or something. But then you get there and it happens naturally, and you know, you take the steps. And I think that's a really comforting idea, that can be applied to a lot of things, you know, like there's a natural progression to things. And you don't always need to compare yourself to these future versions or people that are a few years ahead of you in their knowledge. It's like things just have to progress on their own time, and just let information seep in, you know.
Yeah, no, for sure. Extremely important. We fall into the trap that we need to rush things, and it's a massive thing to deconstruct, because like wanting to rush is almost wanting to end your life.
I know, right?
Quicker.
Isn't it so silly? It's like,
and
I get caught in that all the time too, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah,
everyone does.
We're everything is it's so fast,
right?
Fast,
exactly.
Fast
it's like you want
just
it to be
like
over.
Slow. Yeah. That's the thing. And because then what are things? Is it like the ultimate goal? Like once you have this, not necessarily for you personally, but once you have, what is the kind of like the thing that all of you guys go after? Is it like the paper? Is it like the finding something new, like a
and it is. It's basically, you know, I guess for people that want to stay in the field, you know, it's so interesting too, because I do like what I do really love about astronomy and astrophysics is that everyone really is, although the people that have made it to become faculty or independent researchers, everyone really cares so much. And because it's such a niche thing, and it's also so cool, and it's so fun, and it's like, it's the universe. It's awesome. Like, people love astronomy, like the pretty pictures, like people love thinking about the universe. It's really awesome. And that is one thing that I really did take away from my experience in grad school is, no matter how, even though people were kind of hardened by these academic ideas or competition, you could still see at the end of a presentation or something when the floor is open for questions, and then all the faculty in my department would just love, like, you know, ask questions. Like, you could almost see their inner child come out in terms of their care, and they care, and it's like sometimes I would just be so surprised by it, maybe my first few years when I'm like burnt out or I'm like over it, and I'm like, they're still asking questions like 15 minutes over, and I'm like, why do they care so much? And it's like these people that have made astrophysics their career, and especially with their research, like they really genuinely care. Like they really care about these galaxies, or about like the way that they really want to know how these planets are forming. And it was something, it's a thread that I really have noticed everywhere in academia and conferences, and I do really appreciate that. And I don't know, like maybe the other sciences are like that too, but I've definitely noticed that like people really care. And so the people that care that much, you know, that want to continue doing their research, they basically the end goal is to either do teaching or to do research as some kind of like long-term profession. And usually it ends up slotting you into teaching, because that's where, you know, you'll get the financial support being associated with the university. And so it's either doing the teaching or research and stuff like that. And then there's other people that aren't as passionate about it, that decide to leave astronomy and go into industry or something like that after their PhDs. But yeah, overall, people want to continue doing research, and they want to be a part of the cutting edge and a part of the new telescopes, or a part of the new things. But I really do think that it is the curiosity that motivates a lot of astronomers, which is cool, because it's definitely not the money. That's for sure, because it's not something that you go into it for the money. So I really appreciate that about the field. People are there because they genuinely care. I don't think they would be there. And because I think that people know, especially with the skills that you've accumulated by that time, that you're, that far, having a PhD. There's a lot of different jobs that you could do. There's a lot of jobs that would be hunting you down for your
Yeah.
data analyzing skills and everything. So yeah,
Yeah.
people want to, and it's exciting because there is always new stuff and there are always new telescopes. And I think it's a field that is, I think it's more interesting than just pure physics research and stuff. I'm not sure exactly what kind of cutting edge things are going on there, but at least with astronomy, we know that there's new telescopes and we know that we can always get better resolution and higher quality things. And there's still so much that we don't know. So, yeah.
Yeah. So what is the thing that what is the thing that surprised you the most that you learned about the universe, that maybe not something that is like, I was going to say common knowledge, but it's not common knowledge because most people don't know anything, but what is the thing that for you is the most like mind-blowing thing, about it?
Yeah, good question.
I mean, there might be probably several things, but
I think, let's see. I think that the thing that is the craziest to me about the universe is that everything that we study is only 5% of the whole universe. And the 95% of the universe approximately is made up of dark matter and dark energy. And those are just two words that we use to describe something that we don't even understand what they are. We just have a very vague concept of them. So 5% of the universe is baryonic matter, which is the term for things that we can detect. So anything that we can detect across the electromagnetic spectrum is like baryonic matter. And that's everything that we're studying, and that's given us a lot. It's all the light spectrums and spectral energy distributions of galaxies and everything, but it's 5% of
crazy.
the universe. And dark matter, so like a bit about dark matter, the evidence that we have, basically dark matter, we know from the measurements, we know that it's making up, that large percent of the universe. But there are theorized to be dark matter halos around galaxies. So the way that this was discovered was a lot of things about dark matter have to do with galaxy rotation curves. So we basically measured the rotation curve of our galaxy, meaning, or we can measure it of other galaxies too, that we can see a bit more edge on. A rotation curve means something to do with like measuring the rotation velocity as a function of distance from the center, right? And so the rotation speeds that we notice, and the reason that there's theorized dark matter halos around galaxies, is because given the mass of the galaxy and given the velocity, it doesn't add up. Like the galaxy, if that rotation speed was actually if it was only the visible baryonic matter that was making up this rotation curve of the galaxy, it would blow itself apart. It would like explode into it's not physically possible for it to exist. So the way that dark matter was introduced was that it's basically just an extra something that's there, that it's an extra. This is why I say when we use the words dark matter and dark energy, don't get too attached to those words, because we have no idea what we say matter, but it's like, what, we don't even know. We might as well just call these things question mark in my opinion, because that's how much we really don't know about them, honestly. But yeah, there's just some extra force. Basically, when studying all these galaxy rotation curves, there's some extra force kind of that's pushing down on the edge of the galaxy, that's explaining why its rotation has to have that speed. So that's how we know that's one of the things that we know about dark matter. That's like the main thing with dark matter. And so we think that every galaxy is enclosed in this halo of dark matter. And then dark energy, a way to explain that is dark energy has to do a bit more with the expansion of the universe. So we do live in an expanding universe, and there are all these theories for how the universe, like cosmological theories for if we lived like in an open, flat, or closed universe, or there's all these theories for how the universe is going to end on itself, if it's going to like explode or if it's going to crunch back in. But so basically what dark energy is it's a negative, they refer to it as a negative pressure. So it's a good analogy that's used is like a rubber band. So if because the universe hasn't exploded on itself yet, right? From what we can tell, because it's expanding, but it's not running away on itself. And it's not the theory is that it's not running away on itself because of dark energy. And so it's like if you take a rubber band, the tension in the rubber band that keeps it from not snapping yet is like dark energy. So it's kind of keeping it in a little bit. And so those are some of the other, some of the mysterious things that are going on. But in a way, some of these things were just introduced as an extra constant in Einstein's equations, that it was like, oh, it doesn't add up if we do this, plus constant dark matter. There you go. Like truly kind of this is how these things came about. So there's all these, so 5% of the universe, we're studying 5% of the universe, and it gives us quite enough to write many papers on. But what else is there? I think potentially the rest is in higher dimensions. I think it could be locked up in higher dimensions. But truly, that's what I always go back to in terms of not really understanding why astronomers are so close-minded about spirituality, or why anyone could ever have the right to be close-minded at all. We're studying 5% of the universe. Yeah. Even in that, we don't even know what the hell's going on. There's a lot that is uncovered, yet to be discovered within that 5%. So it's like, if we're studying 5% of the universe, who's to say what's right or wrong for the rest of it?
Yeah, totally. It's was it Socrates, I think, who said that the true wisdom is in knowing that we know nothing?
Yeah, I don't know if it was him, but yeah, I like that quote.
So yeah, it reminds me a little bit of also the human, because the human eyes can see such a nothing on the spectrum. It reminds me a little bit of that. And what you say about the people is like, oh, I believe only what I see. So then we don't believe anything because we can't see shit. So we know, and I've seen this picture, this photo that is like blue with like things of yellow and red.
The cosmic microwave background.
There's a photo of the start of the universe.
So I'll explain what that is. So basically, so this is some other evidence for why we think that the whole universe was at one point all connected into one singularity. So the cosmic microwave background is kind of the remnants of the Big Bang. So in the Big Bang theory, everything started together as this one overlapping cosmic soup, basically, that expanded very, very quickly. And at a certain point, everything was expanded enough for all of the photons of light to escape, to basically not necessarily be hitting, for everything to, it kind of goes from all being contained to there being enough separation between everything that photons can escape and they can make some imprint in it was like the first signature of radiation imprint in the universe. And so what it looks like is it's in the microwave wavelengths, but the temperature is around 3 Kelvin. Not that anyone here is familiar with Kelvin, but it's just a fun fact. 2.73 Kelvin. But so it's basically just it's the ambient background temperature of the whole universe, and it was created from the first moment that all of the photons and radiation had enough room to just like escape and move free, and they weren't just bumping into each other all the time, is another way to put it. So it was like the first imprint of radiation of the universe. And so we can detect it looking at all around 360 degrees. So that's probably the map that you are referring to. And one thing about the cosmic microwave background is that it's the same everywhere, despite these tiny little fluctuations. It's the same temperature everywhere to 5 decimal points out of 2 Kelvin. So it's like 2.73 something Kelvin. And so this is a really important, like, this is the big concept about it, and why it's so important is that this ambient temperature everywhere, like all distances, of the universe. I know it's kind of hard to imagine like some background temperature. Even for me, like some of this stuff, it's very hard to envision. It's very hard to wrap your head around what any of this stuff even means. So I understand that. But so it's this background temperature. It's the same. It's a 5 degree to like very, very high precision is the point of why that's important. It's really high precision. And the fact that it's the same everywhere we look in the universe tells us that at one point they were all connected, and that's kind of the evidence that we have for the fact that backtracking the whole universe was knew about each other, as we say, at some point.
I see. So, okay, I think, and so how can we say and how can we measure that the universe it's continuing to expand? Is it with that knowing where it started and so the expansion so far we can predict how much more it's going to expand?
So the expansion rate is measured by just measuring the receding velocity of galaxies, basically, and just being able to tell, like, this was Hubble was the first person. That's why it's called the expansion. This constant that is like the expansion rate of the universe is called the Hubble constant, because it first came about, we used to think that when we were looking at everything before, we could tell that other little specks in the sky were whole galaxies as opposed to other stars. We used to think that everything was just like in our system and in our orbit, basically. But then Hubble discovered that not only are these other things in the sky other objects like galaxies, but they're also moving away from us. So this was how the expansion of the universe was discovered, when they saw there's these whole other galaxies and they're mostly all moving away from us. So then there was kind of, I think, essentially piecing together enough information, you're able to figure out the approximate speed that things are moving away. But the thing that's weird about it all is that there is no center. There is no true center of the universe. Every single point is a relative center. So at every single point, everything appears to be moving away from you. Like anywhere you are the center of the universe at that point. So there's no real center, which is why it's like, where's the edge? What is it? These are all valid questions that don't really have an answer. Once you get into this really big stuff, like the whole expansion of the universe, like the edge of the universe, well, we can, we measure back in time, but it's all so relative, because we can just look back and know that, okay, we're looking at that galaxy from 10 billion years ago, but still it's like, in relative time, that galaxy, whatever it is right now, it's valid in itself. And if it still exists, then it also thinks it's the center of the universe. So it's just, it's really trippy.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that fact.
Yeah. There's no real center of the universe. Like there's no place on a map that any astronomer would point to. And yeah, so it's like, what is symmetry and...
So but we know it expands and we know how it's gonna end.
So we don't really know how it's gonna end. There's basically these there's a few there's basically just different theories for how it could end, and this is where it gets kind of complicated, because we talk about, that's where it gets into like the geometry of cosmology. The people that study this, it's very like abstract sounding, because we start talking about the curvature of the universe and whether or not we lived in a curve or a flat universe, but the meaning of that is not necessarily very intuitive. It kind of it has to do more with fluctuations, and it gets a little strange. But that's basically what those different theories like depend on, because it's like, oh, if it's a curved universe, or if it's curved in on itself, then maybe then one theory is that it'll expand and then collapse back down. But if we live in an open universe, and that's why I say it's a little complicated, because I'm not even sure necessarily how to explain like what these things mean, because they're talking about this like abstract geometry of space-time. That's what these theories get into, and it's pretty cool, but it's also like, whoa. I remember taking cosmology, I'm like, it's just very deep and abstract, and you're just it's so it's strange.
Yeah. Interesting. I've heard, recently, I think, I don't know but we can talk about that space time. So time is not really, no, wait, the question is, like, I've heard that, like, we kind of know now that space time is into something else, into something bigger. Like, it's not the fundamentally all there is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. Like the way that it is viewed in terms of like astronomy right now is there's just the space-time, the fabric of space-time that is curved by mass that you have, that describes gravity. And there's a lot of other ways that we have evidence that that gravity bends things, that you have that some gravity bends light around it. Actually, my good friend in my program, who has the same advisor as me, his whole thesis was on these really cool things called Einstein rings. So gravitational lensing, which means when you have like a really massive galaxy in your foreground and then there's something else behind it, the light, the mass, the gravity, I'm like, gravity, I think there's a lot of, I think gravity is real, but I think there's a lot of things that are misinterpreted as gravity potentially. But basically the theory behind it is that it has to do with line of sight, because there's light from a galaxy that's trying to get to our eyeballs on Earth. In the path along between where that light comes from and our eyes on Earth, there's another really massive thing in the way. So what happens is the light and it's just the way that we see it. This is just an optical effect, but it obviously gives us, the whole thing is that it gives us information about the way that the physics of space-time works. And then the light bends around the galaxy, and then it can go in all these different directions, and it creates what's called an Einstein ring, or like it can create multiple images. So the galaxy will be lensed and it'll have like multiple images, and these things look really cool. You should go Google some of them after we're done. And yeah, so they look really cool, and that gives us that's one of the things that gives us some information, we think, about the way that light bends around massive objects, or the way that the space-time, kind of bends. It's this whole bending effect.
Right. Yeah. Because the thing is, we interpret like a lot of things with our human mind, and it's sometimes complicated to detach from things, especially with, like I was saying in the beginning, especially with scales and time and things. But it is possible. I mean, is it possible that we are into something that we can't even comprehend, and we couldn't believe it's possible because we're not able to experience things at that scale, but that even that whole universe, and even like, let's say, 1 billion years can happen can happen for other entities or something else at a total different pace we experience as human what is a a billion year. We can't experience what is a
Yeah.
billion year, but it make sense like that we think like, oh wow, like a billion years, it's a lot, but maybe
Yeah.
there's for something else, it's like a fucking second for us.
Yeah. What I was going to say, like, sometimes, yeah, like time scales are something that's so funny. A million years is on an astronomical time scale that's actually pretty short. So, it's like our sun is going to live another 5 billion years. And then I studied, something that really put some time scales into perspective for me was when I did a bunch of research on star clusters and star formation. So basically what happens is everything forms in clusters and in groups. And I think that's also how souls, I've heard souls travel in groups and everything, and there's all this fragmentation. And so when star clusters are born, so stars are born together. Stars, like on a very individual tiny scale, they're born, one at a time, but in the same, like roughly it takes about 1 million years or so for a whole cluster to kind of form together. And then there's still they form out of a gas cloud. So they form out of a cloud of gas and dust and everything. And there's kind of all these, a bunch of these local collapses that start to form them all together in this cloud. And then after a few million years, and so a star cluster that's considered young is like under 5 million years. And that's also when there's still ambient gas that's around, and there's all this feedback from these really young massive stars that are emitting a lot of energy and kind of creating all these like little wind bubbles or all these little things in the nebula. And so there's all this gas around still, and that happens still after about 5 million years, and then it takes another few million years for the gas to clear. And so when you look at a star cluster that doesn't have any more gas around it, that's when it would be around 10 to 15 million years old. And that's that's one of the ways that we're able to detect how old a star cluster is, because if it's had the time for its gas to clear out, and that's like about 20 million years old, and then it'll continue on, and it'll eventually dissolve after maybe like 10 billion years or like another billion years or something. So
the one we're seeing when we seeing at night, how old are these ones?
So like the Orion Nebula, for instance, in the Orion, so the Orion molecular cloud, Orion is actually a pretty young star cluster, and there's still gas in that one. So Orion is less than 10 million years old as a star forming region. So it's still considered like a stellar nursery, like an actively forming star region. That's the best example I can think of.
But how old a star must be so that we can see it from the Earth here?
Good question. I think probably, I'm like, I don't know. I think you could see, I'm trying, because, okay, so the stage that a star, I think as soon as it's emitting light, basically, which would be the stages of star formation, it starts off as like this core, and then it goes into a protostar, and then before it becomes a star. I'm trying to think, protostar. Oh yeah, well the thing is they're usually embedded still in some material, like a star will be embedded in some gas and dust, or like a protostar will still have some things surrounding it. That's actually a big part of the reason that we either see things or don't. Like usually there's a lot of gas and dust. A lot of gas and dust are clouding things that have just formed, because that's associated with these really dense stages of collapse and everything. So usually like there might be some extra debris and material around a protostar at that stage, but pretty much it only takes like a few million years for it to form.
How can you explain what yeah, I was gonna say a few million years, that's totally fine.
We can wait.
How can you explain why we say that like humans are made of stardust?
Because that's the only thing that there is in the universe. Like everything, this is a huge thing, is that everything is recycled. And in terms of also just the way that like all that exists in the universe is, well, it's mostly hydrogen and helium. Astronomers, so if you view the periodic table, Astronomers actually refer to anything heavier than helium as a metal. It's kind of like a joke. Funny, right? It's
Inside joke
because
for all.
inside joke, because it's actually pretty rare. There are heavier elements, but anything heavier than helium we refer to as a metal. And there's so it's mostly hydrogen and helium. And then heavier elements heavier than hydrogen and helium are actually produced in the centers of stars. So this is why. So heavier elements are produced in the centers of stars. And then what happens is once a star ends its life or potentially goes supernova, so iron is the heaviest element that's produced in the core. So what happens, the way that it unfolds is, it'll be done burning its hydrogen and then burns helium. And then once it runs out of a fuel source for nuclear fusion, the last element is iron. And so iron is produced in the centers of stars, and then the star will go supernova. So then everything is just spewed out into space. And it just creates all this ambient material of all these different elements and some heavy metals and all this stuff. And then after a while, depending on whatever is happening there, it just becomes a nebula again. It becomes a molecular cloud for another group of stars to form. And then that's the exact same material that forms around individual stars. So, you just have all this ambient material, and then it becomes the material that forms a protoplanetary disk, meaning the stage before planet formation. So when for planets to form around stars, you have the collapse of the individual star. You just have a bunch of this material, this extra material that's floating around and that's swirling around, and then eventually from angular momentum that collapses down into a disk, and then eventually certain parts of that start to fragment and into their different orbits and become planets. And so it really is just that. It's that these elements and these materials are recycled, and a lot of them are created in centers of stars. And especially we're at the stage of the universe that we're at right now, at the present day, with the universe being, I don't know, we estimate 13 billion years old. I don't know if that's true. But that's one estimate that we have. There's been, our galaxy has been through definitely a lot of stages of star formation. And so that's kind of how we know, basically also the presence of metals in a star system or in a different galaxy or something will give us an indication of how old it is, because of what I said, because it has time to produce, because the stars have had time to form and then explode and then produce some heavier elements.
So everything comes out of stars.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And what you may have said this, but maybe I didn't get it. But what sparks the formation of a star? Mm-hmm. What's a star?
Yeah, so it's basically gas, but what sparks the formation is for stars to form, you need cold temperatures and you need dense. You need a dense environment. So you need cold and you need dense. And so what happens is when you have a region of space dust, and so it's a combination of gas and dust, but basically the gas is mainly, the gas is what burns itself. The gas is what's going to be fueling itself to create the star and to have the star continue for its life. And the dust is kind of just there for the ride. It's kind of just like around there. And that's like what the planets end up being formed out of. But so what happens is you reach a critical overdensity. So once you reach a certain density and a certain amount of mass is contained, the cloud collapses into itself. And so it collapses, and you have that gravitational potential energy of the collapse is turned into kinetic energy. And so it's the energy of that collapse that forms a star. But it actually is still, it's star formation itself is still quite a bit of an open question. I did research on this. My first project in grad school was on star formation and was on prestellar cores and basically how these cores cluster together. It's still an open question in terms of like we think we understand the physics, but what we don't understand is multiplicity. Like we don't understand the efficiency of conversion of material. We don't understand how much material is needed to create, how much is going to create a certain mass star from how much of mass of starts out. And we don't understand, like, because there's binary systems. That's a thing that a lot of people don't know. A lot of stars in the sky that we see are binary systems, meaning two stars are orbiting around each other. So there's single star systems, which is our sun, and then there's binary systems, so two stars orbiting around one another. And it's really common. They say about 50% of the stars that you see out in the night sky are a binary system. So there's multiples, there's twins. We got twins going on. And we don't really know, like, oh, do they form in the same core? Like, we don't really know the physics, or what I like to say is the method to the madness. Like, and we also don't know the preferentiality of it, like in a whole cluster, like, oh, are the biggest stars going to form first? Does it depend on the distribution? Like how, like, you know, what's the method to the madness of the distribution of who forms first, you know, who gets, which are do the big stars form first? The small stars form first? Yeah, we have some understanding of like the statistical distribution of like stellar masses in clusters like that. But yeah, there's a lot, like there's a lot of simple things that are still pretty big open questions, or like a lot of people are still like it's definitely not fully solved, like the way that that stars formed. A lot of people are actively trying to get better resolution data and everything, so we can really like understand what happens when the star forms and how all the mass is distributed.
And so are they all ending up formating like planets, or are they all turning into something, or it can be just
like they definitely, I think that no, there's probably, you know, there's definitely stars that don't end up having planets around them. My guess is that it's just going to depend on the amount of debris and the amount of extra material that happens to be around it at the time. Because when I say a molecular cloud, I'm talking about, it's a whole range of densities, and there are all these different shapes and sizes. And so you're going to have a part of this, it's just an amorphous thing, just like a cloud is amorphous. There's going to be certain regions of it that are more dense, and there's going to be certain regions of it that are less dense. And so the more dense regions have more clustered stars and stuff like that. So it kind of is just going to depend. It's like a little bit different every situation.
The sun, it was the same principle, like it's being created with the same principle of a star.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Sun was created with a collapse, just like that.
Right. If we say just we look at Earth, the sun, and just our solar system, because we know, because for the longest time, like I know, like we rotate, but I didn't know we are moving also in a direction.
Yeah.
And this is pretty crazy.
Yeah. So what it is that what we refer to it as proper motion of the galaxies. So so if we zoom out a little bit first, the galaxies. So there's also galaxies. I'm like, let's zoom out a bit more. Actually, classic. The galaxies are in clusters. They're in this cosmic web, brain filament like structure of the whole universe is this cosmic web. So there are clusters of galaxies. But in general, the galaxies are kind of just flying. They're just flying around left and right. So, but they're moving straight, more or less. Yeah, no, the galaxies are moving straight. Maybe if there's a galaxy cluster, even if in a galaxy cluster, it's not necessary. Like the more massive ones float to the center. So there is some kind of like bigger gravitational effect going on there. But even in galaxy clusters, it's not like galaxies are orbiting around anything. So galaxies are moving just straight, and they're just flying around left and right. And we call it proper motion. And it's just they're just moving straight. And so the galaxies are moving, and then you have the actual rotation, more specific motion within galaxies and along the plane of the disk, or if there's spiral arms and stuff like that. And so then the arms of a galaxy are rotating. But there's also, by the way, elliptical galaxies. There's not just, I feel like a lot of people don't even even know, because we always see like spiral galaxies, but older galaxies are elliptical in shape, meaning they kind of just look like a blob. They kind of look like a blob of stars. But this is usually a signature, that a sign that the galaxy is much older. So yeah, so we have this motion of everything around, going around the central supermassive black hole. We didn't even talk about black holes yet. So everything so everything's moving around, and then the galaxy itself is moving. So yeah, and so there's also some in star clusters, there's also this kind of random motion of stars, this like velocity dispersion, we call it, of stars just in star clusters. So there's some kind of velocity just for things to exist in their in this cluster. They're kind of having some relative motion, keeping it gravitationally bound. Basically, it's measuring it's measuring how gravitationally bound it is, because star clusters, because stars form from a group of gas and dust that's all gravitationally bound. Like it starts off kind of gravitationally bound as a group, and then it drifts off, and stars can kind of just go out onto their own, basically. And yeah, so they lose that gravitational influence over time. But yeah, there's a lot of different motions that are happening, and I think and that's the reason that galaxies would be colliding into one another, and that's the reason that galaxies collide, because they're just going. And I have a lot of hybrid spiritual thoughts that I've sort of been developing and thinking about galaxies merging, and how it's like this feminine masculine energies that would merge, because like I said, a lot of what we ask in this research is, what's the method to the madness? You know, is there a rule? Is there a law? Is there a higher structure to this? Or are the galaxies just randomly floating and colliding? And then, so that's where the spirituality comes in. The spirituality comes in where you have these two galaxies colliding, and you say, what if there was a higher order that was having these two galaxies collide? What if it's a soul contract? You know, can't really say that in grad school, but you know, to us it just looks like random. But there's also, you know, these are the things I think about in terms of, there's also this randomized motion, and there's, even though nothing's random, you know, that's just the word for the dispersion of it. But yeah, I think that there might be some higher order or some deeper soul level things that are explaining why certain astronomical bodies are gravitate to one another, or there's some other, you know, there's some higher layer or level of universal law that's setting that we just haven't accessed yet.
Right. Yeah. Well, it a little bit like planet influence on from an astrology point of view, that type of stuff.
Yeah, that stuff is like, that really bypasses gravity entirely, and that I think just gets into pure electromagnetism and pure, I don't even know. I actually think of it more in terms of alignment. I think because my thoughts on astrology, I think astrology is very valid. I think the reason that people laugh at it in academia and everything is because people laugh at what they don't understand, right? And you know, this is my whole philosophy with all of this stuff is and in terms of the science of the spirituality is, I just think there's pure truth to it. I just think there's a pure science to it that is maybe just hasn't been accessed yet, and that we just don't understand yet. But I think, so, and that's just what I want to know and what I want to understand. But in terms of astrology, it's like everything, this is the way that I approach it. I kind of tend to work backwards. I'm like, you know, I'll see like, okay, I know, it's like I really know in my heart, and I really feel like this astrology stuff, it's very valid, and there's a validity to it. The astrology charts have angles, and they're all about angles and relative angles within a circle, and about things lining up and things in a line of sight. And so if that is the case, then there has to be something with just a relative alignment that has an impact on your energy. And so that to me would be some kind of like magnetic field thing. If there is alignment, and this bypasses gravity, because there is no way that a constellation or a star that far from us would have a gravitational effect on us. So it has to be something that bypasses gravity and that only uses measurements or impact that are spatially invariant, meaning don't have any effect on space. And that would be like angles and the reason that also points back to magnetism is because a lot with magnetism has to do with these like perpendicular lines, or just I don't know, there's a lot of concepts of like of symmetry and angles, or just things relative to the magnetic axis. And, there's just a lot of things with magnetism. So, it for me, it also brings me back to that point of the relative center. And I think everything can kind of be collapsed into like a relative point, and everything in the directions like around you and the alignment of it all comes back to like some central 0 point of your heart field. And I think that's how things I think that's how the planets have an effect on you. I think there's some alignment thing, and it all goes back to you as the relative center of your universe.
Yeah. So I was gonna get on black hole, but I just want to get on something else. So we because you've been talking about magnetism. So we live in a electromagnetic world. Can you explain, just like things about the block that constitutes the what we see, the reality we're in when we touch things like that. We're seeing only an image that is created in our brain, and that there's like physicality is kind of a not necessarily an illusion, but
it is an illusion.
But just that's a word that can scare a lot of people. But
I know, right?
But like, can you explain from like not necessarily an easy way, but like just let's say explain us that what forms everything are atoms, and what's an atom, and why when I touch that pen, I don't really touch that pen.
Yeah, the whole idea has to do with the fact that atoms are mostly empty space. And I think there's a whole other level of this that is kind of like a vibrational thing, but I do think that anything that is physical is dense as far as we know it. But yeah, the reason that this table next to me is like mostly empty space is because atoms are mostly empty space. And so yeah, it's kind of just this it does create this illusion that this illusion that we're touching things, when it really is just a series of vibrations, that are all kind of just next to each other and moving, and we're almost like feeling a vibration of it, is kind of almost what I would say. We're feeling a repel. It's like we're feeling just two atoms like repelling. Not necessarily like with their force, but you're just feeling like that. The rubbing together of like two fields is the way that I would put it.
Yeah. Which is, it's kind of like the first thing that for me started to kind of change completely, how you see things, and it's something that there's no way back from getting up to this thing.
Definitely.
That like what we see is simply an interface.
Yeah, right. And I think that is what is the weirdest part of it, because all that we can do is put it together with our senses, and with our eyes, that's like, what's even real? Like everything is so relative with our eyes and our filters, and our eyes are just a filter, and then our brain creates the image and it turns it upside down and backwards, and we actually like, because our eyes are concave, or the word for it? Convex, concave, I don't know. There's some whole like optical physics that happens with the inversion of the way that our brain, has to invert that image that we see with our eyes to piece it together.
That's the most fucked up things to me.
Yeah,
like what you just said, like this. So this thing of what we all see, we don't see something that's there. What I see right now, it's my eyes who are capturing something, and then my brain is making me the image I see, right? But this is the most mind-blowing thing, one of the most mind-blowing thing I realized in my life. It's like we're not seeing, each of us are not seeing the same world. We see our own image of it. There's nothing to see. We interpret, and then so everything that we see, it's that weird concept. It's like, it's not imagination, but it's formed in your brain. You're not seeing it as it is,
and it's just light reflecting, because we can only see all that our eyes are able to see, the red through violet spectrum of light, and that's everything is photons, and everything is packets of light, and our eyes are able to see a certain range of light. And so anytime we see anything, we can only see something if there's a photon there. A photon is just an energy packet of light, and that's we're only seeing something bounce off of that, and based on whatever color it appears to be is what we see. And I think too, there's something like when it comes to vision and things, I automatically go to this crazy quantum physics perspective that is I've been thinking about this a lot lately, actually, like your observation. I think that because of this whole thing with Schrodinger's cat, and quantum physics gets all into the importance of your observation of something, and how something becomes like real or not real based on if there's an observer to it. And so I think it's kind of like, if you're not that whole thing, like if there's no one there to observe it, what's real or what's happening. But I think that in terms of what we see, it gets so interesting, because there's how your brain kind of intersects with what your eyes can see based on your beliefs and based on your expectations. And then if we get into kind of blurring the lines between like this dimension and different dimensions, like there's the subtle energy realm. There's so much going on, right, that isn't technically in our wavelength of sight. But I think that if we, when you adjust your expectations of what you expect to see, you allow different things into your filter. So I think there's a whole other level of your filter of your eyes which makes sense, because your brain creates it, right? Your brain, we just said it, your brain creates what you see. So when you adjust your expectations of what you're able to see, that's when you can start seeing different things. And that has to do with the quantum field. And that has to do with how rigidly you're observing your reality, because everything is actually just a waveform. Everything is a waveform. So that's why we see things rigidly, because we expect them to be rigid and because we expect them to be there. But when you loosen up and when you stop observing your reality so rigidly, you could see things in waveforms. You could see things as their true sense, or you could start to see other things that you didn't think that you could see. So there is a direct connection with your beliefs and what you expect and all this thing. And I think too, we send a laser beam in a way out from our eyes when we observe something. And so there's a physics interaction that happens. It's like your beam goes out and observes it, and there's an interaction, and then it comes back, and then it goes in your brain. So it's your gaze sends out like lasers, because that's also the windows to your soul. It's your eyes or your window to your soul. So there's like it's a two-way street. It's a two-way street. When you are observing something, that's what quantum physics says. That's what quantum physics states the importance of observation of something. Your observation of something doesn't go unnoticed. It changes. It's a two-way interaction when you observe something, which is crazy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's the double slit, the Thomas Young experiment. That's the good start. And because what is also crazy is that not crazy, but something I was thinking about is the human body kind of like evolves, and we know that it evolved through time and adapt, and we're supposed to like we're adapting depending on what we do, right? The human body adapts.
Yep.
But yet we're since a while now on this planet, and you have stuff like that, like your eyes. Why the eye cannot adapt and grow the capacity to perceive more of the spectrum of light, by example? Like this is something that I find weird, by example. Why
right. I think
because we're always exposed to all these different
right
things.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I think that maybe it just takes long on like a biological scale. Maybe it takes too long of a time, and we're just into tiny time scales right now,
right?
To be able to see those things. But
maybe we're not supposed to.
Yeah, I know. Or we're not supposed to, by design. I believe that humans are intelligently designed. So
and so light is a waveform, but it has also, like, everything has a vibration that we can measure. And depending on, because it's a concept that it's easy to, like, most people know this for sound, right? Like we hear different frequencies and things like that, but we don't like see that. We don't know that maybe this object like actually has a frequency as well. How does that it's because we can not see but hear a certain frequency when it's like too high in the spectrum. That's the thing, right?
Well, for like, are you saying for like being able to detect the frequency of other things?
Like we can, because if you tell me, like, by example, this like an object has a frequency, like we know also, like, by example, the planet, right? The Schumann resonance, or like object vibrates at a certain frequency, but we can't. But it's like something we can see and touch, and then we can, if I put, by example, because we hear from 20 Earth to 20,000, even less when we're a little older, if you didn't blow your ear, and I put like a sound of 1,000 hertz, you're gonna hear it, but you're not gonna see it. But yet these two things are frequencies as well. Does it make sense?
I think I think it's like, I think there's a difference between the sound frequencies, though. It's like, it's weird because I think that the way that I see it is that like when I see shapes, I see them like the reason that a shape or like some sacred geometry or something has a frequency is because it's like the whole fabric of the universe has these different intervals where something can reside on, right, in some range of the frequency, or can be translated to. It's like it's very analogous to like music and the music staff, and how everything kind of just travels along the music staff. But like then so when then a shape, it's like that shape is imprinted into the quantum field, and then it can be translated into some vibrational frequency, right? And so I think that sound, and I think it's just a translation, like sound frequencies that we can hear with our ears, and then the frequency of like a crystal or something, or how a crystal is emitting some frequency, or for example, something like a fruit, or something that's, you know, mainly something that's alive. Like when I did my psychic class that I was doing this last few months, we had a whole unit on clairsentience, meaning like using our subtle energy body to feel things. And what we did was we did these exercises where we would put different things around the room, and we would use our hands to kind of help us. And we would put like the Wi-Fi router or something, or a crystal, or something organic, like an apple or a pineapple or something. And you would go around and you would try to see if you can feel the difference in the subtle energy bodies between the different parts of the room, where like the difference in something that's man-made, not organic, or like the difference in a vibration between the book and the plant, or the book and the apple, or the Wi-Fi router and the apple. And so I guess just all to say that there is there's a translation into vibration for different things, and for mostly the way that I see it, it's almost has a spectrum of, how conscious something is. And when you get into that, like, what is something that's inorganic matter versus organic matter, feel the difference of. But then I think there is a direct translation between a sound frequency and some other vibrational frequency, or maybe like a shape frequency, or something like that.
Yeah, like the because with frequency, with vibration on a table, like I've seen they draw things with, like, if there's dust, they put or sand on the table, and then
and then it creates a sound, right?
Yeah,
or it's a shape. Yeah, exactly. So that's the way I see it. It's like a direct translation, and that's where you get into sacred geometry, and that's where it gets mathematical, because the shape is gonna have a numerical geometry to it. So then it gets like, I love all this stuff. And this is like, there's a lot of stuff that Robert Edward Grant does, who we were talking about before. It's all baked into it. The math, and the math, like math is geometry. And like one of the first videos that I ever did on my Instagram, like when I was starting to put out content, like that that first one or two like really terrified video that you have, or you're like, I don't know what I'm doing speaking to a camera, but I'm just doing it anyway, was about this download about how like numbers are true. And just about numbers and numerology, and one part of the video was numbers are fundamentally true because of geometry. You can't say that 2 or 3 is like made up and is a figment, and it's a concept of the mind, of the human mind, that was made up because a triangle exists. So numbers are rooted in geometry, which are rooted in truth, and then also rooted in the dimensions and stuff like that. So that's where I think the overlap is with how these things are translated. And then music, music and sound frequency are just another vibrational thing, and how these sounds, and how sound healing, it ripples into your body, and then it just starts, right? Because the way that works is then the sound starts vibrating your cells to move in them at that frequency.
Yeah. I do a lot of, not every time, but let's say maybe a third of the meditations time that I do it with frequencies and sound.
Yeah.
And it's really nice. One thing you just said, we know that numbers are not a construct of the human mind. It's something interesting, because very often when I think about modern society, and I say stuff like the system we're living in today, for a lot of people it's like, oh, that's life. But no, that's one way of living out of a lot of other ways we could live.
Right.
And numbers are true, but somebody that comes tell me, Robin, you have to work 35 hours a week to get money that doesn't exist or whatever, and this is how you need to live your life. This is not true. This is made up out of a certain human mind, and I think it's very interesting but it requires like to have the ability to the chance to get out of a certain environment to be able to observe it and see it. But I think it's very interesting, and I like to live like this with whatever situation or things, like, is this just like a construct of something? Is just like completely made up, or is it like a universal truth, like a law, something that like
that's exactly kind of just circles back to everything that we were talking about in the beginning, and why I just feel like I've always had this disconnect with certain things, because my mind subconsciously the way that my personal mind works is I calculate like based on if something isn't like fundamentally true, then I don't really view it as having as much of an importance. And that doesn't have anything to do with like creative things, just in terms of like what I would bother spending my time on, so that's why there's certain things, and there's certain studies that you're studying another thing that someone made up. And to me that just doesn't make sense, because I'm like, if you're going to study anything, why wouldn't you study something that's true? And so I think that's why I think the way that I do, and that's why I'm studying everything that I am, because I just want to focus on something that's true, something that, and that's exactly kind of what has been my compass leading me lately in this last 6 months, and kind of just discovering my own ideas about the spirituality of astrophysics, like how to, like, what's the law, like because I do think there are universal laws, and like, there are universal truths and there are universal laws. And the way that I see it is that if something exists, odds are there's some universal law that would have gotten us there. And I kind of think that too about extraterrestrials and aliens and conscious life. And, I had this thought about how like the conscious life of the galaxy has to be affecting the overall vibration of the galaxy. Like there's other components that matter. Like astronomers just study all these physical things, like the gas or the mass of this, or the how much hydrogen and helium it is. But then there's another layer of the story that is consciousness and conscious life. And I think it's just as valid in the equation, in the physical equation. I think there is another component that is consciousness. And so that's kind of what has been like just recently, this like compass of the way that I think is like, okay, there's these spiritual truths that I know are real. Like I know that there's karma, like I know that so what's the universal law? Like how do we backtrack? How do we fold it in to all the science that already exists? Because I don't think, that's the other thing. I don't think that for the most part, anything that I've learned or anything that's in standard academia, like it's all valid and it's all part of it. I just think there's just more to the story. And but yeah, everything that I've learned is valid, except for maybe like the Earth's interior, because I think there's
the inside of the Earth, you mean?
Yeah. I don't know like because I do believe that there are inner Earth civilizations, and I do believe that there's alien life that exists inside of the Earth. And I don't think that would be possible given the current theories, given if you open up a textbook and you look at the slicing of what the interior of the Earth looks like, it doesn't seem like that would be possible given that. But I do believe that that's the case. So I'm trying to understand. I think there might be a different physics to that. And I think there are some things that we maybe like have wrong, but there's a lot that we have right. And there's a lot that you can't deny. Like, we know we have catalogs of all these galaxies and we know their shapes. And like, yes, we have these statistics of what's out there in the universe. And we know a lot of the way that things operate. And in terms of back to the globe stuff and back to the Earth, I had a recent, what felt like a breakthrough of simple, but felt like a breakthrough of thought about, I think that it was about the symmetry of the earth because, okay, so I think I don't exactly know what the earth's interior looks like, but I do believe that there's maybe pockets in there where there could be civilizations or something like that. And then I was thinking, if the surface of, okay, because all the models, and of course the way that any of these models work is a lot of these things are symmetrical. And this is why things aren't always accurate, but that's not to blame scientists because we have to start somewhere, right? We start with these models, and a lot of these models, everything is spherical, and everything is circular, spherical, like of that shape, and so a lot of these models then end up being symmetrical, and we have, it's like, okay, then the earth is the same symmetrically from the core to the outside, but I realized like the surface of the earth is not symmetrical. The continents, continents, you used to have Pangea, we have all the continents everywhere. If the surface of the earth is not symmetrical, what makes us think that the inside of the earth is supposed to be symmetrical?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, totally.
That was a recent thought that I had, and I was like, whoa, I feel like I'm onto something with that.
Have we actually dug like that that deep into the earth?
Not that we're supposed to know about.
Yeah.
But like, no, definitely not. I don't know what the truth is of what's going on behind the scenes, but like, no, I don't know. There's so much, and there's also, there's so much about the earth and the magnetic field that really remains kind of a mystery, in terms of these patterns, that we experience and stuff like that. And I think, I think there's a lot to do. I talk a lot on my podcast, like about the astrophysics of our ascension and what's going on right now. And I think there's something with the earth moving through our solar system, moving through a band of high energy radiation, this photon belt. And I've kind of heard some things from other channelers about this, but I want to, I want to move into try to making sense of it for myself. But I just, I think there's a lot of things that could come as a surprise to people in terms of like the way that we're orbiting around the galaxy, or just, I just think there's a lot of different pieces of the equation that are directly related to consciousness and ascension cycles and descension cycles, that have to do with the astrophysics, that there's no one to explain that right now.
Yeah. It's interesting to see that because you're very axed on like the truth. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to see that you it doesn't prevent you from I was gonna say from thinking about all the things that we can't have a mathematics around, like
that
aliens,
is true,
or there's no like science proof, because and it's what I personally found on like in a few different people that are very much axed on just like the science and just the fact, and just there's like one truth and the truth which is true for certain things. But then when you have the point of view of, because like what do we think is, when we talk about truth, what kind of like perspective, what kind of point of view do we have when we say this? Is it yours? Is it mine? Is it humankind? Is it the 3D dimension? Is it
the way that I think of it, and I think because of by training, the way that astrophysicists try to think of things and the way that we approach problems is, can we think of something that's predictive? Like, that's the first thing that came to mind when you said like what, like the truth or multiple truths. Like, one line of thinking of this is, and it's kind of bled into the way that I'm approaching things too with the spirituality thing. If this, the way that I see it, one way of looking at a truth is some law that lets you predict a different now accurately, right? Some equation to let loose on time, because a lot of these equations are a function of time. And so what can we plug into this equation as a function of time, like with all the right variables, and then at some later time you can accurately predict, like, is there an equation such that you can, based on the vibration of a galaxy or something, such that you can predict the physical distribution of alien life in different planets that would be necessary to sustain the galaxy at that point in its evolution? Like, is it as predictive, I guess, is the way that like one way that I see universal truth or universal law, because I see it as like this overarching thing that would then branch down. So if there's a universal law that this affects this, then maybe we could roll it back and say that would accurately predict. So this is the way that astrophysicists are thinking about things. How can we predict? Is there something that we can plug in that would accurately predict, that would be able to match up with what that is? And that's a lot of the way that these models for the evolution of the universe, and this is how we study, why galaxies have certain properties now and they looked different back then. Like how does it unravel across time? And that's what we're always seeking. But then I also think, in terms of like ultimate truth, I do think that those things exist. And then I guess maybe what would combat it is either the concept of multiple timelines, or but then it's like, is there a way to predict the different timelines? And I'm getting like all deep now. But then the other thing is what completely goes directly against science is and what makes it so hard for people to do exactly what I was just saying, predict, is free will and consciousness. And there is free will in this universe. And there's the option to not. So where does that come in? Is there really any equation that can predict, that can unravel these timelines and things? Or maybe it is a set of probabilities. And that's another thought that I've had too. It's like, everything exists in this probability function. Everything is like a set of probabilities. So nothing is singular. Everything comes along like with the bell curve, with a series of sideline probabilities along with it. But I think maybe we can predict that, and there is math around that stuff. So it's like, if you can predict the central curve and then all these side timelines around it. But then it's like, ultimately, basically what I was just saying, free will and consciousness, and there is a level of unpredictability to consciousness, right? Like to free will and to choice. So I don't know, I don't know where that fits in with the ultimate truth.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting, the thing with, like, you talked a little earlier about soul contracts, and is there really... Sometimes I ask myself, is there really... I mean, once you've, let's say, awakened and you're seeing patterns, you're seeing synchronicities, and you're looking back a little bit in your life, and there's all these cascades of events that can't be a coincidence, and that led you to a moment, and it's just like an insane probability. You're like, how much am I in control, and do we really have free will? And then I'm like, I'm supposed to do this, and no, I'll do that, and then but was this plan or not? How much can I actually am I actually in control? Or I feel like we have like some kind of points that we'll have to cross.
I was just going to say that.
But
That's what I believe too. I think there's node points. I think there's intersection points that we have pre-planned in our life. And I think the in-between is all free will though, because I think there's always multiple paths that you can get in between. But I agree that I resonate with that too, that there's these intersection node points that we're always going to cross that. And it's not even that strange when you think about it, because that's just that's nature, and that's the rivers, and that's the tribunes, or what's the terminology, for the river splits out into different parts and then it comes back to itself. So it's not even that crazy, it's not even that out there to think that our life evolution and the probability functions of our life combined with free will would be similar to the natural flow of water splitting off and coming back together.
Yeah, totally. The principle of correspondence from
Yeah.
Have you do you know the Kybalion with these
No.
the seven principles of the universe? I mean,
No.
it's said that it was written by Thoth, and it's all this. There's there's the principle of vibration, rhythm, correspondence, gender, polarity. There's like seven total, and it's like it's explained in a way that it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And so yeah, just something
Cool.
to. But wait, what was the next thing? I was gonna say something. Yeah, we were on free will. Shit, I had something next. Hey, let me have a sip. Yeah, so what do you think? Because ultimately, what do you think? Is it something that, do you think it's important to, and it's always something that I like to ask to people that are a lot into science, like, how important do you feel all this is compared to, I'm going to say, when I'm saying all this is like the whole knowledge about the universe and things that are very much out there compared to upgrading or having a better human experience, generally speaking, how the knowledge about the universe is compared to
Yeah, so
simple
just like
things
living.
to have a better life as humans.
Are you saying how important is it for like the improvement of our life, like
Yes.
knowing? Yeah. Like
How do you think it's gonna
yeah.
is good? How do you think doing this you're at service of?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't even have to think about that, but sometimes we're on like a life purpose. So how do you think this is at service
Yeah.
of humanity? That's a pretty big question. How do you think your life is at service of humanity?
No, it is. And yeah, it's a good question though. And like I think that it's not necessarily correlated to being able to live a happier or better life, having all this information. I actually think there's almost no correlation. I think it's just for fun to find out and just for curiosity to find out, because I think that if you were removed from this information, but if you still had this some philosophy on life that had to do with, living in the moment or cherishing the moment or allowing yourself to get to feel happy and to not, to make your life meaningful in the ways that are like just on this planet and just in front of you and meaningful to your soul, then I think you don't even, then in that case, the information wouldn't matter. And I think that there is obviously an aspect with like technology and, improving and or like as a species, maybe there's a different impact because of our, just evolving in consciousness and as a species. But I think, maybe on the smaller scale in terms of, individually day to day, because I think that you don't have to have a thirst for any of this knowledge to appreciate, the beauty that's in front of you or to appreciate your life. I think there is almost no correlation with that, which is funny. But I think it's more of, I'm like, it's not important.
but what for you, but let's say that for you it's in direct correlation though, because it's like something that you're obviously passionate about it, so like just studying it is would say that it makes your human experience better, right?
Yeah, right, because I have this insatiable need to know, or just it's motivating me. I think that there's usually because things are always moving and because things are always in momentum, like there is always going to be some factor moving you from point A to point B. And so it depends on what that is for you. You know, everyone has their different factors that's moving them across the line in life. And there always has to be something, because things are always in motion. So I think there's that too.
Yeah. What do you think is the main, not necessarily purpose, but kind of like the main goal of human existence, from a point of view first that wouldn't be, let's say you're not opening it to the world, to the spiritual world. If let's say you cut that window for a second,
Yeah.
what do you think? Because the probabilities to here and now being alive are like there's like zero, right? Like it's insanely low. What do you think is
Purpose.
do you think is there like a meaning or any kind of like purpose if you remove spirituality? Because I can't really, because it's like, I'm interested from just your scientific point of view.
I know, like
knowing the chances are like zero.
Right. Yeah, if you remove that part. That's what I can't think of much either, other than experiencing. I mean, people that don't, there's plenty of people that don't believe in anything, or there maybe that don't believe in the afterlife, or don't believe that anything happens beyond this planet, or that anything exists beyond this planet, but that use that instead to help them enjoy whatever is in front of them, right? So I think the purpose of life is pleasure, always. And then I think that you can apply, I think that you can I guess it would be like, if you cut off the spirituality side, it would just be pure pleasure, right? And then that makes me think, it kind of brings me back to the mentality of the lower chakras, the survival, the survival mechanism aspect of surviving and pleasure, those kind of two the basic needs kinds of things. And then when you add the spirituality in, that's when you get into the lessons and having it have a deeper meaning. That's when you get into, the purpose is for lessons and for expansion. But again, that would always be needing to move you from some point A to point B, which is the expansion of the universe and the expansion of souls growing.
Yeah. We're all like, everything is energy, right? And it's one thing, because when I was in high school and stuff, I was hating math and physics. It was really not just the kind of stuff I was into. But I remember one thing that stuck in my mind. It's so funny. The teacher saying, one kind of the first thing as the introduction was this line of like, nothing is lost, nothing is creating, everything transforms.
Right. Yep.
And it's the only thing that I remember from years of high school is the only thing. And so you talked a little bit about you mentioned the afterlife, like when you know that everything is energy, and there's like energy can't, like it transforms into things. Like, what do you think happens? What are your thoughts on the afterlife and in that regard? Just in I was going to say scientifically. I mean, do you think the brain creates consciousness, or consciousness creates the brain?
Yeah.
That's the...
Yeah. I think consciousness creates the... I think the consciousness animates the body, right? Yeah. And I think there really is a physical energy exchange that happens when the soul, and I think I think it's really purely physical in terms of the soul leaves the body, and the soul leaves the body, and but that energy goes somewhere. And I think because it can't be that energy doesn't have it's actually kind of just coming to me now. It's like that because we perceive it as not here, because just that energy alone doesn't have a place in our physical reality anymore when it's not animating a body. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist in the subtle energy realms. But because we live in a physical universe, right, a physical earth plane, then the only an energy that is that's capable of inhabiting something physical would be able to make sense to us. But so I think it's kind of like once that energy conversion is done, that's what gives us the illusion of disappearance, or the illusion of loss. And I think it really simply is an energy form. But then I think there's another level that it's not just the energy floating here. I think that, and that's where you get to the deeper spiritual side that we maybe don't really fully understand. And I think it's returned back to source, or it's returned back to some place. I think in between incarnations, I think there is kind of this place. But my psychic teacher, who's been teaching me all these things, like she always talks about how we can feel our life force energy, we can feel our soul, and if you're very still, like you can feel it the most in on your lips, like when you feel just something like kind of buzzing in your lips. And she always has us do these cool exercises, which is awesome, because I just feel like people don't often enough like remember that they are being animated by something energetically, and you can feel it. And if you're quiet, or if you kind of just go into stillness, you can send your energy or your thought into the tips of your fingers, and you can feel your fingers buzzing, and that's how you feel your soul, and that's how you know that you're animated by an energy. Because even when you're dormant or something, even though obviously our hearts are still pumping while we're alive, but you can feel that energy like at the tips of your fingers or in your lips or something, and you can just feel that tingle, and that's your life force energy, and it's cool.
Yeah, because the spirit theory is that we're, as humans right now, we're just an extension of our soul that is in another dimension, and it's kind of this life force energy that is controlling our body, and that is that third aspect of body, mind, and soul.
Right, I agree. Yeah.
And
right, and it's like it's a fragmented aspect, because our soul is bigger, and when we incarnate, we basically just send off a piece of ourselves into the body, because it's not the whole soul, because our soul is more pervasive than that, and it can be, and consciousness can split, and consciousness can be in more than one place at once. And so it is kind of just an aspect of us that's sent down into this incarnation.
Right. It's interesting when you said, like, when you close your eyes, because the thing is so easy. We have our eyes, like everything is here in our head, so we feel like we live in our head, kind of, right? But as the moment you close your eyes and you try to, I mean, it's like astral travel or all these things. It's understanding that your awareness and your consciousness is way more than, it's not like just here.
Exactly. And that's why I think there's so much to the eyes, and so much to the two-way interaction that happens when we open our eyes and when we're observing your reality. Because when you're not, and when your eyes are closed, you might as well be anywhere. Right? Like, how are you going to argue with that logic? Like, you really can't. Like, when your eyes are closed, like, you might as well be anywhere.
Yeah.
If you're not observing anything.
Totally. There's something I saw a little while ago that I really want to do. These are dark retreats where you do several days with. There's actually one in Oregon, and I know a second one in Germany, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Where you do more or less days. So like some people do a week. You can do 3 days or 4 days, but complete dark, and also no contact, right? Like you have somebody that brings you a meal a day, and that is and that is it. And this, I think I really want to try it at least one time, because like
Yeah.
fuck,
No,
like
I've
this
heard
is
of it. That would be like freaky, but really
yeah.
cool. Like sounds boring.
It
No.
is like I just like yeah, like it recenters you. Like you really like this is like
Totally.
the expression like you're by your alone with yourself, and you can
Mhm.
go over everything. And all
Yep.
these people that are doing it when they remove it, like they cry and they're like it's
Yes. Yeah, I've seen
insane.
some videos on Instagram
Yeah,
of people like removing it and just having these. Yeah, that's got to be
yeah,
crazy. That's like wow, and that's something that can yeah, you have to completely do that to simulate it. You can't just meditate for an hour and be like, "Oh, I think I know what it's like to,
yeah,
but anytime I do an hour long meditation or something, I'm always like, "Wow, that was so cool. That was
yeah,
great." Like I never really give myself like a full hour to do that often, but it's like that's nothing compared
yeah.
like can you imagine like yeah just
Insane.
even
Yeah.
yeah when I meditate for an hour I'm like wow I
Mm.
feel pretty calm and I remember that I'm a soul, but imagine how much you're going to remember that you're a soul
Oh yeah.
if like that's kind of what I always say too about meditation is like and that's also with the closing your eyes. It's like when you are observing your reality for a bit too long you
Oh
forget
yeah.
that it's just a a projection from your eyeballs,
Mm-hmm. Totally.
and that's why yeah, that's why coming back to meditation is pretty much in my opinion to remember that you're a soul, to not get too carried away with this
Mm.
life.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially right now, like the
Yeah,
overstimulation.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
exactly
yeah.
what we were saying in this other the last episode. Is just like it's just too much, and it goes worst and worst. And I think one of the biggest challenges for us as humans is going to be able, the one who see through this, going to be able to transmit that to kids, and to quickly not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily protect, but to quickly find ways to transmit this wisdom of like the world around you is different. There's two different things. There's your own world, your internal
Mm-hmm.
world, and the external world.
Yeah.
And if you don't know this, if you're not aware about this, if you don't know that like you don't have to participate and react in everything and anything all the time, you just become a zombie,
Yeah.
and just become a slave of this hustle modern society that is
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
never
And
give
like
you a
lately
moment to
too,
rest.
I've been focused a lot on just the energetics of the aura and how, your aura, doing maintenance, energetic
Yeah.
maintenance on your aura, and really just coming back to realizing that the only thing you really have control over is your own aura, and you can
Mm-hmm.
create this energetic bubble around you. And there's so much power that we have though over our own
Yeah.
aura, and we with our mind and just using intentions to or cutting cords or all this stuff, like we are in control of our own aura and our own energy, and we can use the power of magic and intention to program it and to and to clear it and to energize it and all these
Mm-hmm.
things. And that's the boundary between your world, which is your energy body, and the rest of the world. And there is, and it's charging up your aura, charging up your magnetism, and all of these things. And just that's what I've really been focused a lot, or just thinking so much about that lately, like
Mm-hmm.
because magic is real, and because
Yeah.
it is real that you can use your intention to cut cords from something that's draining you and you'll feel better, because that's also real. Like let's use it more. Like
For
let's
sure.
focus on using that, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're in control over. You can't control someone else's aura. It's coming from your aura is coming from within you, and it's coming from your heart field.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's also yeah, it's the boundary of how we interact with everything, and it extends out like 6 to 10 feet. So
Yeah.
clean it up.
Yeah, totally. It's because we lie to you, telling you that you don't have to, because everything is just you can't consent or not to like everything. It's just
Mm-hmm.
that everything has consequences, it's cause and effect. I can decide to not participate in the society anymore, and live
Right.
like a hermit. There's
Mm-hmm.
consequences with that, but I can't do it. And it's all about knowing that you are, like you said, in control, and you have the power
Yeah.
to say yes or no, and
Mm-hmm.
say more often no to everything. I'm just kidding, but like it's just
Yeah.
um um I had something else. It's gonna come back. Yes. So I've heard you talked a little bit about. Let's get back. I just want to get back a little bit on this planet. You, even though that this actually can reach more than that for sure, but like you talked a little bit about divine feminine. The feminine and the masculine energy, and like how this is tied to humans and how we navigate this is something I'm very
Yeah.
not necessarily passionate about, but I'm very it's like lies in there, like keys, massive keys to live in peace and harmony. How, well, first of all, how do you where do you think that comes from? And we were talking about truth, and like, do you think that there's a fundamental truth of like, this is the feminine, this is the masculine, and what is your point of view on that? That's a big
I
question.
do, because and it's kind of just been more so like a downloaded thought that has become very apparent to me lately. It's more so that this idea like found me, just really thinking about it and just realizing how important this concept of masculine and feminine is, because I think though they're in a way, it's not that different from just saying things like two different things like light and dark, like binary ones and zeros. I think it's not that far off from that, but I do think that and like outward inward, right? I think it's all in the same similar category of opposing energies, but I do think that the whole aspect of feminine and masculine is something that's more tangible to us as humans, and it's more relevant to us because that's our emotions, and that's the way that we're designed, and we're split up into these two genders and all these things. And I think that and I talk a lot about this on my Instagram and on clips on my Instagram, like the way that I perceive these different meanings of feminine, and I try to feminine and masculine, and trying to like put more of a physics meaning to each of them. And the way that I see feminine is sort of this like chaos frequency, like this randomization expansion that is this uncontained, like wild, expansive energy, and then the masculine energy would be grounding it in. And another way too is the feminine is like the expansion of the universe, and the masculine is that dark energy, negative pressure that's containing it, that's pulling it back just enough for it to exist, just enough for them to coexist. But it's still, you have both, and they're both equally valid. And I think it's more so about, it's one of the ways that we as humans are meant to understand the way that energy divides itself, and the way that energy manifests itself and plays out like in our human incarnations and in our emotional bodies. I think there is an aspect to it that's very relevant to us and the way that we're designed, and the way that we have these upper chakras that's split by our central heart chakra, which is the center of our magnetic field, and then the lower chakras that kind of ground us down to earth, and the meanings of these, and how these upper chakras have this more expressive, cosmic, seeing through energy, whereas the lower ones are grounding us and also get back to these like instinctual things like survival, and like the sacral sex chakra, like procreation, and all these things. Like there's an aspect, I just think you can go so deep in terms of the meanings of these, right? It's like this masculine is this survival, this survival grounding, rooted in reality energy, and then the feminine is this expansive, but they both coexist in us, right? And we have the feminine and masculine side of the brain. We have these two sides of the brain, and so it's like there's something with all of it happening where they're meant to all coexist in one container, which is us, because we have a bit of both. And and I don't know if it even necessarily like is defined by like your technical gender, because we obviously know that we have a mix of masculine and feminine energies, and you go through different phases of your life where you're expressing more as one or the other. And yeah, I just think it's so interesting. And I think that the way that I've been thinking about it lately is back to that kind of idea of fundamental truth, and that I do think that there's a truth to it. And the way that I see it is like it could be a really important concept of bridging like the science and the spirituality, is just leaning into like trying to unpack what it means. And I've thought about like what's a feminine or masculine expression of an astronomical body, or of a galaxy. Is it like a supernova outward expression is like a more feminine expression? And then you have these other collapsing inward forces, and like I said, it's similar to like out and in. Expanding, contraction. It's like all these natural things. So I even have been wondering myself, like, with the extent of like what does it even mean, the feminine and masculine? And that's where I think it maybe is more relevant to us as humans, and just the way that we have come to understand it, because we have a meaning to each of those.
Yeah. Yeah. And I even think that there's depending on each human, there's a different base. I think there's a base balance on each human of how much we have. And then depending on also what kind of activity we're engaging in, we're switching into more one or
Right.
another. But I have this kind of like theory of because I think that's all. I think what I think is that we've been put here, and the human experience is just that it's literally just like we'll put some kind of blindfold on you, and we just want you to fucking figure it out and stop like hitting each other and start just like living in
Yeah, I
harmony.
agree.
And I see all these things about I think I literally think, by example, transgenderism is like an expression of that, and it's literally there to also open the mind on this, and to also challenge the acceptance and challenge this ego that like we need to transcend. Like it's literally this, like we need to just like understand and accept things and figure it out on how to live
like
together. And we're through how unique, like, because we're all the same, we're all unique. And the challenge is just like, how do we destruct the earth?
This is exactly what I was just saying on the episode of my podcast that we talked about the aliens and the recent stuff with ETs, and I sort of got what felt like this profound download while we were recording that, which was about how it's like it's about how part of our evolution is getting, because we have had that blindfold over us, part of our evolution is getting back to that pure soul, or getting back not to that pure soul, because we wouldn't be here if we weren't supposed to experience the limitations of being a human. So I think there's no need to bypass that, because we're supposed to have these limitations of being in a physical body. But there's something to in terms of what we've lost a little bit is this is our connection to our intuition. And that's the whole reason why anyone would want to wake up in this lifetime or remember their spirituality, is having a direct access connection to your intuition. And part of that is being able to feel another being's intentions, and being able to feel another's energy without anything to do with their looks or their words or anything, because it's possible to deceive. And that's what we've learned, right? In all of this awakening and all of everything that's been going on this planet, it's very possible to deceive. And that's where you have the boundary between the physical and the energetic. When you're being told something, or when the news is saying one thing, but you're feeling another, and you're being told to go against your intuition, we're learning to get back to our intuition, right? And so it's like this learning to get back to not needing anything physical, not needing anything physical to inform you of something, which includes not needing another person's physical differences to inform you of their intentions, but you being able to know it and to feel it, and getting back to that that clairsentience, or getting back to that pure feeling of connecting with your intuition. And I think that's a big part of why this stuff with the disclosure and the ETs is happening, is for our evolution of getting humanity back closer to a level of just knowing, feeling, feeling energy, as opposed to needing something to be accurate, as opposed to reading something and believing it, bypassing that and getting into your intuition.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it would be cool to start talking about intuition at school and
yeah.
And things like
right.
that.
And that's what I feel like, it's this weird blurred line between, and that's exactly what this whole thing with the awakening and like misinformation and disinformation and all this stuff is. It's like, how can you be trusted to, if you're seeing all these different things, like how can you be trusted to create the truth for yourself based on your own feelings? And it's a lot of people have not been able to trust themselves to do that, and so they're relying on other things. And I think that's kind of just like the core crux of this whole spiritual journey, and a part of the phase of the evolution that humans are in right now is bypassing that physical reality to get into what can't be refuted, which is your own knowing.
Yeah. But everything looks so real though.
Oh, it's funny. It does look so real.
And yeah, so what do you think so now with like all what you have, and you're getting into how do you call that, like exploring your psychic abilities and stuff like that, do you have like some kind of direction, some kind of main purpose, some kind of like core thing that you think is meant for you here, that you are like a why, like a direction, a some kind of purpose that you have, and that makes sense? Or right now you think you are still like putting on the pieces together, but you can't see it completely?
Yeah, I think it's a bit more of that. I think for me, it's just a knowing that I don't know exactly where I'm going, but I know at least the path in front of me, and I know that I am supposed to be putting the pieces together. And so that's kind of, that's basically what I'm doing, just working on putting the pieces together. And I think kind of just trust. It's about trusting that unseen and trusting the unknown guidance, like when you know that you're supposed to be doing something but you don't necessarily know why yet, and stuff like that, and kind of just just trusting that unknown feeling. It's what I've really been doing.
What helps you having this faith into like trusting something that you can't see, or do you have any things that helps you? Well, spirituality, generally speaking, I found like it's something that helps navigate life for sure, but do you have any other things that helps you connect more with this intuition, with like have more faith into, or accept more like the unseen path, or the unknown, or stuff like that?
It's like I feel like what it is that helps me is just the knowing, just like this is a circular answer, but just like, I don't know, it's what it is for me is that it's like my mind bypasses to the end. It's like I just know very deeply that this is the way that the universe works, that there is some, hidden, that there's these hidden things, or there's this that there's a bigger picture to the story, and kind of like knowing, because I got to that point because there's no way that it could be this whole coincidence of things. It's just, but I think that a lot of people have this belief, like they do know at their core. It's just a matter of the difficulty of enacting it in life, right? But I feel like at the end of the day, I still go back to, well, like, how it works. Like, I know I know roughly the energetics of things, and that, you know, sometimes you have to like, you know, follow the unseen or kind of trust this. But so there's that's kind of like, even though day to day sometimes it's hard to trust, it's like at the end of the day, I don't like, what's the alternative? Thinking that this is all a coincidence and this is all random, and thinking, you know, and thinking that none of this has any deeper meaning, like swinging the pendulum the other way. Like, you know, what's the alternative to believing that everything is connected and happening for a reason, and that I am on a divinely guided unseen path? The alternative is that it's all bullshit and that none of it's connected, and that it's all like a coincidence. And I'm like, well, I don't believe that. So it has to be this other thing, and kind of just, you know, leaning into that. But it's definitely been a journey. Like, you know, I really have been working on my own self-trust for my spiritual abilities and connections with that. And I think I have made some breakthroughs in the last few months. And a lot of it is in terms of developing your intuition, though, it is trial by fire. You have to, like, what I've really learned and found is that you have to act, because this is a physical reality, and there's actions that have to foster future reactions. You have to act on intuitive things and get that feedback. It's like a feedback system too, you know? So that is actually the only way to build self-trust. And this is what I've learned from just developing my psychic channeling abilities recently and practicing readings on people, is literally having, then that first vision comes to my mind, feeling like I have no idea if it's right or not, but saying it anyway, and then later getting the confirmation from that person that was right, and feeling that really scary feeling of like, what if that was all made up, and like not know, you know, that really, when you really get down to it, that tiny leap of faith that is trusting your intuition, there has to be an action taken either on an intuitive idea, because this is the universe is like a feedback system. And so you take one step and the universe arranges itself around you, and then you take another step and there's like another calculation that's done, and you get the feedback. So that's what I would say in terms of like trusting the intuition and everything. There really needs to be like, there's no way to develop your intuition if there's no action step, or if there's never a moment that you like trust something and act on something even though you weren't sure, then you're not getting anywhere, then nothing's happening, you know. Like, there always is gonna have to be some moment where you take something and you act on it, or you take something that you really you're terrified is completely wrong, or was not your intuition at all. Like, there's actually always going to be that moment. And that's what I learned recently. I learned that there's no getting around that. I was really hoping there was a way to get around that, but I've learned that there's not a way to get around that, I don't think. And that's what I've been kind of learning, to develop my intuition, and just, you have to take some step of acting on it to get the feedback. And I think that is how I think that's how the non-physical energetic world interacts with us. And there's a belief, there's a trust that's built with that. But you're not going to ever be able to develop that self-trust just like having, you know, you're never going to have a security of the answer. It's only going to come about with trial and error.
Yeah. Totally. Something that you said also earlier that can help with that is the trusting that if you do this anyway, like nothing wrong can happen. Like nothing, like having faith into the fact that if you follow your intuition, it should only realign yourself with what you're supposed to do.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I agree. I don't think there's a wrong step. It's just feedback. It's feedback on what the step was.
Yeah. What is and then wait, what is it? Yeah. What is something? I just want to ask something. What is something that you hope improves in this? I'm not going to say world, generally speaking, but let's stay on the Western society. What is something that, how do you think moving forward we should implement some things to improve as a society? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. So
What
I
do you
think,
like? Would you like to see, moving
yeah,
forward, 50 years, 100 years, whatever, like just near future or a little longer? What is something that you'd like to see?
I think there needs to be more more leaders that speak from the heart and with vulnerability,
Yeah.
because it's, and I think and hope that that's what the spiritual era is ushering in, people that can speak from a place, people that can lead from a place of leadership, but also have extreme vulnerability, and really are leading from a heart, and from the heart, and from this, yeah, and from this place of acceptance, because I really don't think that we have much of that right now in all different facets of
Yeah.
society, because everyone is always hiding something.
Mm.
And it's only when you're willing to not hide anything anymore, and that's really just what I've learned so much, just from, I had, yeah, we didn't really talk about it, but I had some stuff with addiction, like in the end of graduate school, and then I ended up speaking about it, and I kind of just burst the shame bubble, and I spoke about it on my podcast, and now I speak about it openly, and I just think once you get to a point where you really aren't hiding anything or don't have anything to hide, it just completely shifts your vibration. And I think that we need more leaders that are coming from a place of having nothing to hide.
Yeah. Yeah, holy shit. Yeah, it's massive. I felt the
Yeah.
exact same way. Like, it's funny because I would have said the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
how we
Like,
change.
and especially like in math and science and everything too. And that's why I really, and I think like Robert Edward Grant has said something similar to this, and that's why I really love him too, because he has this brilliant mind, but it's coming around math and consciousness, but then he also has this like, yeah, deep like love aspect in the way that he speaks, and it's kind of just this completely different side, and I feel like it's different than some of the current leaders or people. I don't know, there are people that or so maybe it's more so like, maybe it's just in certain sectors, because of course, like, I don't know, I'm thinking like, like lovable TV hosts, or people that have their own TV show, or things that people like, that people view as living from the heart, or that people view them as very moral and caring. And I think maybe it's just a lot of other sectors in life like need to have that leadership to show that it's possible to have both. And I think that also stems from my history with academia, and just seeing all these stern leaders, and seeing all these stern people that don't show any of their vulnerability, and that don't show any of their weakness. And I don't think it's good for us. I don't think it was good for me, but it was, what's good or what's bad, it was all part of my process and life. But I think that could be an interesting change of events.
Totally. Yeah, because then if you see this, you kind of have, you have that feeling of like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be as well, and or that's the goal, like it's to be that stern figure or whatever, or that's whether it's not really. But yeah, I totally agree. I really like that. I think it's a lot tied to something we were saying at the beginning of the competition aspect of life, is losing the fear, losing the feeling that you have to compete, or losing that sense that the world is attacking you, it's against you.
Yeah.
Whereas it's just like, and when you lose all those things, you're one thing you said was really good. Once you have nothing left to hide, you feel differently. It's like the vibration is different. It's completely different, and you lose that sense of that you have to protect yourself anymore. And this is when things are flowing way better, and like there's a real before and after that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think there's something, and I know because I've experienced it, and I think you have too, right? Because you've been pretty
Yeah.
vulnerable about certain things. Like I've experienced that, going from having
Mm.
something really big to hide, because anyone with addiction knows that you have a lot to hide if you're ever in that position. And going from having something really big to hide to then eventually having really nothing to hide, it is a huge
Yeah.
vibrational shift,
Yeah.
right? And I
Oh yeah.
think it's a lot of it is even intangible or unspoken. I think
Mm-hmm.
most of it is unspoken. And it's just you
Yeah.
just live differently when you have nothing to hide. And
100%.
yeah, and this whole idea of the no competition, and I love the way that things are moving into with New Earth, and just it is true that there doesn't need to be competition, and it's an old paradigm. And if every single soul is unique, then it has its own path, and there really
Mm-hmm.
is place for everyone. And I love this. Yeah, I feel like obviously there's so many new souls and people and coming up online in these spaces, and I do feel like a lot of people are now embodying or starting to embody that idea that there is no competition. It's
Mm-hmm.
just collaboration.
Totally. And it's just, well, I mean, we can it because it's I think it's really tied into that same thing of intuition, and it's because the system wants to put all of us in the same thing, so we're all the same, so yes, we compete. But
Right.
once you start following your intuition, you're going to be on that unique path, and then you're going to be able to leverage how unique you are, and then all of a sudden you're somewhere where there's no one can compete with you because you followed such a unique path, and leveraging all this
Yes.
intuitive things, that then you break this fear and this competition aspect. It's all linked. I found like it's all rooted into just like tuning in and listening to your intuition, and the expression of unicity of all humans,
Yeah.
and not like falling for the cases we want to put, the boxes we want to
Right,
put
right. And it also
everybody
is
there.
believing. It's different when you actually believe in infinity, and when you believe that there is enough for everyone, and there is not, and that's what's really undercutting the whole thing of the lack mentality or of the competition, is thinking that there's not enough for everyone. But if we live in an infinite or extremely abundant universe, then you should know that there is enough for everyone.
Totally.
More than enough.
Yeah. What's an easy? Do you think like science has doors that opens on spirituality? And what do you think are things that you can transmit, since you have these both things, to the science world, that the one that can be closed to spirituality? What are things that you think you can do, or you would say that can help some science people that would be open, but that just can't grasp it?
Yes.
If there would be any.
Yeah. I think the most important thing is the electromagnetism, and magnetic fields is the biggest thing that is linking science and spirituality. And so what an electromagnetic or a magnetic field is generated from a moving particle, from a moving charged particle. And so our electromagnetic field in our body is created from our heart pumping blood and moving around ions. There's ions moving in our heart that are creating our magnetic field. And all other celestial bodies have a magnetic field too, from their spinning. And so from basically, objects like the sun and the earth, from their rotation, there's some molten like plasma in the center that's being rotated, and that's generating a magnetic field. And so that is generating our aura of humans, and it's extends out, and the whole magnetic field that's enclosing the earth and the sun and everything. And then also, for instance, when we ground with the earth, and all the science and benefits of grounding, putting your bare feet on the ground, you're literally exchanging electrons with the earth. There's an exchange of particles. So there is a base level, a base scientific level that I would say is the most important to start with, is the magnetic fields and the fact that it's controlling it's part of our subtle energy body in a way. There's to the extent of the physicality to it, it's very physical, and then so it appears in these different bodies. And the other thing is that the shape of our electromagnetic field is toroidal, so it kind of generates this giant elongated donut torus shape. And that shape then also appears all in plenty of other locations too, like around, it's the same shape of the magnetic field around astronomical bodies, but also around black holes in the centers of galaxies. This was a bit of what my thesis research was on. We end up having this like toroidal donut shape of dust that's like around the black hole. And so all of these shapes are repeating themselves throughout nature and everything, and just the way that and it's all about our magnetic field. And I would say that anything that's generating magnetic field has a soul and has consciousness, and that's what I would say is really the direct connection. And I think the reason for that is it's the portal. A black hole is in a way punctured space-time from what we understand it as now. It's a 0 point energy. It's like it doesn't it's a transition. It's where something that can't make sense to us can reside and can enter and exit from potentially. And so it's like the black hole, or like this. So yeah, it's this or just wherever is like this originating, this central point of our magnetic field and all this stuff. It's this it transcends space and time. That's what a portal does. And so if the center of our hearts is transcending space and time, then that's where that's where things that are beyond space and time, like our soul, is going to enter. And that's where things like that are going to reside, or that's where that spark happens that makes it such that we have a soul, because it's originating from the fact that we have a magnetic field. And so I think that is really kind of one of a big crux of where consciousness intersects with spirituality. And I think that there are these magnetic interactions that are happening. And I think there's also like this plasma in the universe and in quote unquote empty space, and astronomical bodies and planets are exchanging electrons with each other too. And so there is this physical particle exchange, and magnetic fields are kind of poorly understood in astronomy and in science in general. They are definitely fall under the category of less understood than things like gravity, magnetic interactions. So that's another reason that makes me know, something that makes me like definitely know that's a bit closer to where the intersection with consciousness is. And I would say, magnetic fields, you can't deny, and no one is going to deny that these astronomical bodies have a magnetic field, and no one can deny that the heart has a magnetic field. So if we are not separate, if we have a similar composition to the earth, and we have a soul and we're animated, why wouldn't the earth have a soul? We all have a magnetic field. So there's a lot of particle exchanges that are happening. That's part of the subtle energy body and stuff like that.
Nice. Yeah. This is why you feel different, or this is why you can feel when you're with different people, right? Like it's.
And when someone walks into the room and your eyes are closed, right? Or if someone's just behind you and you don't hear them, and you feel them, things like that. You can't deny the existence of that.
Yeah, totally. What is the I was gonna say, where to start studying astronomy for younger people that wants to start that? Is it?
Good question.
Do you have
Like,
any like channel or content or things around that is like that that is like introduction to get into this or not much?
Not really. Not that
Yeah.
I don't know, but I mean, there are plenty of, there's a lot of great videos on YouTube, and there's like a lot of good YouTube channels, I'm sure, for kind of introductory stuff with that. I think there's so many resources that are available to us and the internet and everything these days. And yeah, I think there's definitely like a lot of things that exist to start looking into, but it's just, I think it's cool when someone is, fascinated with it and pulled to it. And I think it's such a unique type of like spark of curiosity. And that's, like what I was saying before about the astronomers in my department. And I'm actually also like mentoring two high school girls right now on research too. And, I can tell that they kind of have that spark within them, which was the only reason that they're doing this with me. And it's like, there's just something about the universe to certain people, I think. And I don't understand why everyone's not like this, but I guess I'll never understand that. I can only understand my own brain. That is just so, it's overwhelming, but there is something for some people that really just pulls you in, and it's that like need to know more, right? It's like, they're like, I just need to know. And so if you find yourself with that curiosity, then it doesn't, there's no real center of the universe. It doesn't really matter where you start. You can start anywhere.
Right. True.
Basically.
And like you said at the beginning, wherever you'll start, you'll actually start from the center, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Last question, and then I think we're good. What are the probabilities that in our lifetime the Earth enters in collision with something and we will disappear?
I think the
Earth.
probability is non-zero, but I think it's pretty low. Well, people always ask me if the Earth is going to get sucked into a black hole. Let me clarify a few things here. One, black holes do not suck. So you have to be very, very close to the event horizon of a black hole to be in its gravitational sphere of influence. Black holes are also the event horizons of black holes are very, very tiny. So, I mean, in the Milky Way galaxy, we have the supermassive black hole that's at our center. And then there might be other black holes kind of lingering around that would be remnants of stars, like stars that have gone to, that have ended their lives in supernova and then kind of collapse onto themselves into a black hole. But just to say that with how big space is and how tiny the radii of black holes are, it's very unlikely that the Earth would get sucked into a black hole. I just want to clarify that because a lot of people ask that. In terms of other collisions with asteroids and other space junk, there's a non-zero probability that something could happen, but I think it's kind of small, and it seems like we have some good technology these days to detect these things or deflect them.
Right. Yeah, we would know before.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, we will not all disappear into a black hole. That's good to know.
Yeah, no. Your odds of getting sucked into a black hole are extremely small.
Yeah, good. Awesome. Alyssa, thank you very much for all this.
Of course.
That was a cool conversation.
Yeah, so much in there. Got some lessons on star formation. And
for those who are interested to follow up with you, I'll put your podcast, because you talk more in depth about all these things where there's so much we can get into just one conversation. So I'll put all that for those who are interested to know more about you and what you do. And that's pretty much it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.